things out. This is what we trust you for. And this today is a sincere issue with regards to how we see you, we desire you, and we hold our hearts toward you. Bless now, we pray. This time, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we all say and pray. Amen. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Good to have you with us. Our moderators are here with us today. Mods, would you please tell us why we are here?
You have to bring us on stage.
Oh, that'd be a good thing to do, wouldn't it? I'm sorry. I surely forgot to make all that happen. Let's make that happen. It's that kind of day. I promise you it's going to be that kind of way. I promise you, because there is a subject matter that many people don't want to discuss, and many people don't know how to discuss it. There's a difference in people talking about something and people knowing how to talk about it and the appropriate way to have effectiveness regarding it. And I want you to really catch this, because it's got to end here today. And for me, I want to make sure that we all understand the significance of this matter, the importance of this matter, and how we have to navigate our lives through this matter. Moderators, very quickly give their brief version of why we're here today so I can continue the subject matter that affects pretty much most of us.
Shalom, good afternoon, and you are here with us today in the preceding word. If you are following us here in Clubhouse, don't forget to follow Apostle so you'll be notified every time he opens up a room. And also, if you're with us WJ Ministries, today's message will be recorded so you can access that when you are able to. The subject matter for today is part 2 of the state of the Black American citizen with a kingdom perspective. Part 1 was broadcast on Friday, the 8th of July, and that has been recorded, so we encourage you to go back and have a listen. We will be looking at the subject today as an African-American person. How does one deal with the relationship in our communities? What about the Black Lives Matter movement? And is there a discussion around defunding the police movement or move to another country? Well, we're going to talk today as Apostle takes us through some of these subject matters. Please do take the opportunity to share this broadcast and also to ping somebody in the room if you're here with us on Clubhouse. Apostle, thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so very much, and I'm grateful for all things that have been done and spoken. Listen, everybody, many of you know that we started part 1 of this just the other day.
Apostle, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm just having a technical glitch day today, and it's all about my errors, not even technology. I did that. All right, everybody. So thank you for those who have joined us, those who accepted my ping. If you know me, I don't ping people in the rooms, because you know what we're talking about is what we talk about on a regular basis. And I'm not here to grow crowds. I'm not here to grow digital currency. I'm not on any of these platforms, whether it's IG, who's viewing with us live right now, or Facebook, who's viewing with us live right now, or Clubhouse, who's viewing with us and listening to us live. Apostle Jones is not on platforms to make a new name. I already have a name, had a name for many years. And my only interests right now are to use my name to help advocate for one, the kingdom of Elohim in rightness. No argument and all of that goes along with that, but also to advocate for who I am and how I live, and why those like me should be aware of things that directly affect us. Today, in part 2 of this state of Black American citizenship with a kingdom perspective, I am that Black citizen, that Black American citizen who has, in fact, a kingdom's perspective. The reason is everybody that's Black in America sees this issue differently. And I want to make sure that we're clear about what the Black American crisis and experience is. We do have, as we know, a great deal of injustice with legal and or matters of race, matters of financial efficacy, matters of family within melanated families across this globe. Racism exists across the globe. Here in America, it is a very unique space though it does have a great deal of familiarity and similarities to other nations such as Australia, as Africa, many of the countries within Africa, and a lot of the issues within the European Union and the UK. We want to make sure that we are very clear here today. I'm talking about a Black American or a Afro-American issue that many people have convoluted and added themselves to and are not really a part of the dynamic here in America, though it is a microcosm of an issue globally. Racism is a global issue. Sectism is a global issue. Terrorism and making people subjected and subservient to others who feel elite and the hierarchy and crumb of the crops. All of that is a global issue, but this today is about an issue here in the United States of America. And because of America's posture within the global community, it is, again, the leader of democracy. It is. America is a great nation with some great problems. I am a great human in a great nation with some great problems. And though many who are, I would say, less informed and more argumentative about matters of injustice and don't know how to approach them properly, except for the emotion that comes along with the egregious injustice we've seen, we put ourselves in a position to not know how to argue or to gauge the subject matter for effective change. And instead of being properly effective, we become destructive in what we express. So this Black American citizen, key and operative word citizen, wants to show the rest of you who are also like me, Black, melanated Americans, indigenous to this land. And what I mean by that is that state of indigenous, that indigenous state has changed over the years, because if you are now what we call a descendant of slaves here in the States, you were a part of all of the slave trading from the African slave movement way back when, and you don't even know what country you come from in Africa, and you were born here in the United States, your ancestry was slaves here in the United States, you are primarily the subject matter for this conversation. But because of America's posture and position in the globe, it affects and has some sense of education for others in their own places, particularly those countries that do practice democracy. They have their own form of slavery. But for the African American, I want to be very clear about this, and I'm going to start off insulting, but not intending to insult. I'm going to say some things that I am aware of, the ramifications I will suffer based on what I'm going to say, but I want you to know I'm only giving you history. I am not trying to tell you what to do. I am sharing with you what has developed so you will know how you need to respond, especially if you are a Christian, and especially if you are pro-protest. At least if you're going to be pro-protest, you understand how to and what to protest, because we do not know. I said that out loud, and I mean to offend as many protesters as I can, because what we do by way of protest is not an effective way of protesting, because we're doing stuff out of emotions. Now, for those of you who want to join the sympathetic element of Black Lives Matter movements in America, this will also possibly offend you. I don't intend to, but I want to give you facts that many have not considered. But today, as we say, you're going to learn. So part one was done a few days ago, and I had to interrupt part one from part two because of funerals and ministry emergencies that we've had, and now we're resuming part two. What we were doing is helping people to understand that those right here, this Black American citizen who has this kingdom perspective, so that those of us suffering injustices, both in the financial arena, in the legal and or the policing arenas, as well as in the family arenas, we can understand where it came from, how better to combat it, and put ourselves back in a better position to be sustainable and to be sufficiently taken care of in our own issues without any outside involvement, but yet incorporating ourselves into a community for the benefit of that community. African Americans in America, you are not a citizen. That's why you have to fight to vote. That's why you have voter suppression issues. African Americans born here as descendants of slaves. I am not talking about my beloved brothers and sisters who have in fact gotten visas and come to the United States of America, have now become citizens by virtue of all that we legally do to become citizens here in the States. You still have technically, you, my beloved brother, my beloved sister, who I'm glad to know you, glad you're here. I want to make sure that you're in the argument and the conversations rightly. You are you're loved, but you have a dual citizenship. Okay, so when you and I run into the police in the streets, the conversation and the actions of the police change based on the dialect they hear from the individuals they have stopped or have right now have need to address and confront. And there is a big difference. And so just because we're all melanated and black, or dark skinned, or have the black people's hair, as we like to call it, and have the actual hallmarks of what it looks like to be non-white, you are and may not be a part of this American issue as you think. Now, you're here. Racism exists. It's a fact. You are going to be dealing with a great deal of it in many different ways, but I want to put this in proper context. Your issue is not mine. What I'm going to be talking about right now, you can relate to, you will be sympathetic towards, and I'll even push the envelope and say empathetic towards. I love you. I promise you I do. I want to make sure you and I are always going to be friends and associates, and especially for kingdom's sake, propagating the gospel of Messiah. But this issue today is about a Black American citizen with a kingdom perspective about the issues in a great country that are as great as the country itself and the great people it's imposing this hardship upon. You may not be a part of that, though you will sense it in your world. This is what we want to talk about today. Now, when I begin to talk about this piece, it's because of the injustices. I am 100% tired. Now, again, to my Caucasian and my Caucasoid and my Mongoloid friends, peers, colleagues, associates, and clergy. I am aware of the conversation I'm having. If you know me, you know I'm giving you history. I'm not coming for you, and we can't group a people by the actions of a few. But there are a lot of actions by a few in authority that affect us quite negatively. And therefore, we have to address this. And though many might be sympathetic, there's no way you can be empathetic unless you've actually been through it yourself. So here is what we talk about. And we're not saying anything negative. I hold all parties accountable. And I want to give history on both why Blacks are in the condition that they're in America, and why others have put Blacks in the position that they're in America, and who's responsible for what. We got our own ours, and there are things that we need to talk about before we keep saying that we're just doing things weirdly. So let's talk more in this respect. I think it was the last shooting in Buffalo that really got my attention, and then the last death in, I think it was Chicago. No, it wasn't Chicago. Where was the gentleman shot 60 times? I'm so sorry to be appearing to be uninformed. I'm really rather informed, but I want to touch a certain thing. Does it? Akron, Ohio. It was Ohio. Okay, not Chicago. It was Ohio, in Akron, Ohio. And this young man was probably, he was in error. He was He broke the law, and he was going to be inquired about breaking the law. And for whatever reason, he decided to run, like any supposed citizen of the United States of America does, and or is tempted to do. Wise? Absolutely not. Smart move? Completely idiotic. If you are accosted or asked to be stopped by the law enforcement officers, you will be. Now, to my LEOs, my law enforcement officers, y'all know me. I love y'all. I pray with y'all. I enforce and endorse. We need law enforcement in this world. And to my law enforcement officers, the things I'm going to say are not directed to you, but there is an organization that you are employed by that has to be fixed. And though you are there, and though you are very, very much probably, if you know me, not the types of people who do this tomfoolery that we're hearing about, you are in fact subject to it. So what I say, please don't let it think or let yourself think I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the organization you're in, and I'm talking historically and factually. Of course, I don't know everything, but what I do know, I'm talking of affirmatively. And you know it, you'll know it to be true. So don't be offended. Still be my friend. You're always going to be my friend. Most of you are my family, actually. So it is what it is. Here we go. This young man decides to run. And when he runs, he doesn't make a wise choice. He has apparently broken the law, because that's why he was being stopped. Now, that's this issue. There are other issues we'll talk about later on. We got 3 days to discuss this. So when this young man decides to run, he is it is reported that there was, in his run from the police in his vehicle, there was a sound, or what some say was they really just said sound, that blasted from the back door. Now, this young man is in this car by himself, stopped for an infraction on the road, and then he jets. Of course, you're going to get police reinforcement. I got a runner. I'm with the LEOs for that. If you ain't done nothing wrong, you're going to pull over and do what you do. Whenever they stop me, matter of fact, I was coming down the road the other day, and I knew I was speeding. Let me tell you how this works. I knew I was speeding, and I was trying to get somewhere because something important was happening. And when I saw the police up ahead of me, I knew I was speeding. I pulled over right next to him because I knew I was wrong. I saw him move his car. As soon as I saw him move his car coming from his park position, I drove to the side of the road and pulled over right next to him. He got on his speaker and says, "You know what you did. Good. Continue on." So if you're wrong, own your wrong and stop. Things go a whole bunch differently, right? Now, granted, he can't see who I am either. I'm in a nice vehicle, tinted. He may have seen my complexion. He may not have. But the fact that he knew I was wrong, I pulled over, so he didn't have to go nowhere. And he was like, "You know what you did. All right, take it easy, drive on." He didn't even get out of his car. He just put on the megaphone. That's a fact. That happened just a few days prior to this issue in Akron, Ohio. So to me, the young man, and any young man who is being stopped by the police for whatever reason, we may deserve to be stopped. We don't deserve a great deal of the treatment once the stop happens. Now, there are a myriad of reasons. I just wanted today unpack a lot of where we get the problems we are having within this part of the conversation of the police injustice. So this young man, he's wrong. He's being stopped. He should pull over, inquire why. He knows why he ran. I don't know why he ran. The issue I'm running into is that once we've done something weird, suddenly we start making these excuses as to why we used excessive, ridiculously excessive force to control a specific, and I do mean a disproportionate amount of excessive force with the Black and brown community members of America. So this young man runs on. They got his tag. They've already run his license. They know who they're chasing. This isn't a question. They get him down the road. He He stops out of the car. He starts to run. Now, while the chase is going on in the vehicle, they purport that he is shot from the back door of his car. Now, I drive my vehicles pretty tactically. And I know that if I'm turning around shooting at the back window, I have to, one, let the window down. I don't have time. Or I have to be turned around to get a bullet shot. And why am I going to shoot aimlessly into the streets, right? So this is what's purported. A shot was fired, or two was heard in the cam in the dash cams of the officers. Shots fired. Out back door, right back door. He's in the left front seat. Nobody else is in the vehicle but him. Doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not going to be the one to hold that in the courts of public opinion. I'll let the laws and the forensics handle that. That's a science that they are very good at doing. Here's the catch. This young man is running away from the police in his car. He can't go any further in his car, so he gets out and does what he thinks is best. He decides to run. When he's running, the police officer's running behind him. 8 of them open fire. 90 bullets are shot. 60 directly impact this young man. 90 friggin' bullets are shot while a man is running away from 8 officers. 8! Entire magazines are unloaded into the air, hitting target, and I don't know where the other 30 bullets went. As a gun owner, as a licensed carry, multiple gun having, go to the range, user of my weapons, protector of my domicile and home, my weapons. I know how to shoot you in your shoulder. I know how to shoot you in your legs. I know how to shoot you below your waist just so I don't get a charge of attempted murder. I know that as a citizen, because I take my gun ownership seriously. So if you come to my home, I know that I have to take your knee out or take your elbow out or take your shoulder out. And guess what? I go to the gun range so I can have that level of accuracy. My police officers, my LEOs understand that everything does not have to be a center mass shot to control someone who is clearly running away from you. You cannot tell me you are in danger of your life. 8 police officers. Now, that having been said, not to relive the pain of this, because for me, it's painful. Because this could be my son who may act like an idiot one day. Maybe he smoked some chronic. Maybe he smoked some ooh-wop. Maybe he got himself a little bit of Henny and he's not feeling the best. Maybe he did not pay a ticket. Maybe his tag might not be registered. Maybe he does not have insurance. And some reason his brain just says, try to outrun the police. Maybe he does, right? Maybe that's just the case. Maybe he tries it. That's my son. I know I trained him better. Maybe he tries to run. And because somebody heard a tire run over a bottle and the bottle busts, the police freak out in their cars and say, shots fired. We believe we heard shots fired. Everybody put your weapons on go. See, I got to deal with that every single day. What if that's my son? It's stupid. Let me get him to jail. Let me discipline him. Let you take him through the court systems for the idiocy of his decision. But if he's running away from you, I promise you, if my son, I'm telling you, I'm so furious with this right now. And I'm very temperate. Trust me. But if I find out my son ran from you and you shot him in the back, you might not get Apostle Jones. I promise you, y'all gonna have to pray for me. And you know why? Because no matter how many times we hear the same exact story, We go down and we protest. We end up getting caught up in the emotions, and then other outside forces bringing people to add to the protests and start breaking our own, because we're protesting in the cities and the streets that we live in. We're protesting in the neighborhoods that we, those melanated individuals, live in. And then suddenly we're tearing up our own property. And I've been watching this for the last 20 years. How many of those rage riots really was us acting complete fools? And now with these last two riots, I'm finding that there are elements that have been planted that are bringing these riots to a heightened area that we cannot return from. And it wasn't the neighborhood and or many of the people who were really there for the protest of the melanation injustice that were causing the issues that caused fire and mayhem and looting. But once you start looting, well, everybody's going to join the party. So I have a problem with protests. But the reason for the protest is what I have the greatest problem with. So now, as this Black leader, I'm a civil leader. I'm a civil activist. I am a prophet for the kingdom of Elohim in the earth. I am an agent and a clergy, a man of cloth for every neighborhood on this particular ground that I live. And I am to make sure we follow peace with all men, holiness without which no man shall see Yahweh. If we are wrong and you ran from the police, you should be taken down, sometimes being wrestled down because you are amped up on Molly, or you've been drinking and smoking chronic, you've been doing gin and juice, whatever it may be. You have this intolerance for pain. And I understand that as a martial artist. I know that there are certain things I got to do to really disable you. But at the end of the day, I'm seeing stuff that goes beyond what I would consider a reasonable response. So, as a melanated man, I know that if this type of thing happens, there's a funeral involved. And there's an injustice in those who will be held accountable for said type of activity and actions. Now, I know that many people don't like to discuss this or get involved in this conversation, but I want to make sure that we all got a clear viewpoint of what we're talking about. I'm not rehashing anything for anger. I'm not rehashing anything so that we can have a reason to fight and be upset. No, I don't want you upset. I want you informed. Now, here is where I got to continue. And here's where I got to make sure we understand that this young man was wrong for running from the police. Did y'all hear me say that? He's wrong for running from the police. Dead wrong and out of order. But what happened to him by said authority is predicated on the very reason and origin for why the police were and are established. And for me, right here in the United States of America. But it does not mean that what we have used for our policing techniques were not started in other countries. Of course, we as Americans are America because we left another country to come here, fought that other country so that they would not become subservient to that country. They wanted their freedom. And once they got their freedom, though they were oppressed in that region, in that place that they left, they came over here and then they perpetrated the same atrocity that was being and trying to be imposed upon them, which is why they left and came here and fought to be free, set their own constitution, set their own union, and live in their level and their dynamic of freedom. But that freedom required oppressing another people, just like those other people were doing to them. I don't want anyone to ever forget that. And the part is we have, and that's why we don't know how to protest. See, my job is to make sure that in all you're getting, you get understanding. And many of us don't understand that this is not some new issue. This is not some just black and white thing. This is slavery and oppression in general. And when you, in fact, are dealing with this type of policing, it comes from a certain place. Now, in part one, go back and read it because I'm not going to go back to part one. We took an article from the New Yorker. It was called The Invention of the Police. It was a very well written program and processed by a person called Jill Lepore. And we took that and helped you come to the place of understanding what the police and how police became a popular element here in the United States of America. Now, we taught you guys quite a bit. We shared from you that article, and I'm going to keep that article going because it's very important for you and I to realize its truth. And it has a great deal of what we call information and history. Now, before I move and finish this article, I want you to understand that what happened here is based on not just what you've been seeing in the streets and the protests of quote unquote Black Lives Matter movements and or the like. It has to do with the reason a thing was established. So you and I here in the United States of America, as African Americans, that's a label they gave you. UKs, you're not African. You're not African Americans. Aussies, you're not African Aussies. UK, you're not African UKs. You're not. America is the only country that has done that because they know for a fact they cannot tell us where we are from because we came in a batch of slave and commodity ships. And then when they were humanely granted this freedom, a lot of the laws did not change. So they had legislation already written in, as I told you in the first broadcast. There's legislation that's already been written in as to who you and I are in America. Don't think because you're able to buy Louis, because you're able to buy Gucci, because you're able to buy Jordans, because you're able to buy, who else, Versace. You're able to buy all these things and even yourself produce a couple of items. You know, maybe like a cell phone, maybe like the stoplight. I don't know, maybe a couple of things like peanut butter. Just because you can do all that inventive stuff doesn't mean you are less than what we told you were when we wrote it into the Constitution. And that is for African American, melanated, born here by descendants of slaves in the United States of America, you are still, and don't you tell me I'm lying, I don't care who you are, what political office you hold, and or what activism you proclaim to be a part of. Until that law changes, you and I are still only 3/5 of a human in this country. And because of that, there is no reason to leave your United States of America and go home to quote unquote Mother Africa. I love my African family and friends and fellowships and members and citizenships, but this is not what you do to solve this problem. You can't just run back home to Africa. Why? Because you are an American. And do you know that most countries around the globe, they love and hate America? You know why? One, and this is not about America, people. I'm not promoting America. I'm talking about the real issues that if we don't understand, we make ignorant steps and choices and decisions. And then we move thinking it's going to be better, grass greener on the other side. And you didn't even realize your grass was far better where you were. So African Americans who do not even know what country they are from. You don't know if you're from Uganda. You don't know if you are from Swahili. You don't know if you are from Botswana. You don't know if you are from Ghana. You don't know if you are from South America. You don't know where you are from. All you know is that you are a part of an overall massive commodity collection machine who created slaves and then landed them in the Caribbean and in the United States of America to promote a financed movement of rich people who made you an indentured servant, snatched you from the kings, snatched you from the nobles as children that you were attached to, so that you would not know your nobility, not know your kingship, not know your right as an elite individual, but yet you are some of the most intelligent people on the planet who constantly keep getting raped because of your ideas. Your styles are taken, your fashion is taken, your hair is taken. All this stuff has been taken. There is a reason for this. This is not about black and white. This is about understanding what slavery comes from. It comes from an ignorance or a removing someone from understanding what they are and causing them to move into survival mode to become something that they probably were not. But yet they have these instincts of their royalty, but they can't connect it to anything because someone purposefully severed it. Now, I need to make sure we're clear on this. Here in the United States of America, you African-American descendants of slaves, you are 3/5 of a human. Your citizenship is always going to be subjected. That's why your slave and your voting is always going to be contested. Well, now, Apostle, I don't believe that. I don't care. Many of y'all don't believe that Messiah came to die for you. Again, I don't care. What I do care about is giving you the information, you using it, you keeping it, you choosing to make it what you want to live from. That is your choice. But my job before I leave and go meet my creator is to always give you the history of how you and I got where we are today. Now, I want to give you this understanding. This young man we talked about in Akron, Ohio, which is what stemmed me to now take a completely different posture. Over the years, these decades, I've been serving as clergy, and I've been serving as a policy enforcer of what is the law, because our Bible says we are to, in fact, obey the laws of the land. We intend that's the right thing to do. We make laws for reasons. The problem is behind the scenes, many of us, though we have new laws being introduced, I was born in an era that I had nothing to do with the Constitution being made. I had nothing to do with the amendments that indicted that we are 3/5 of a human, that we would not have rights to vote, that we would not be this, that, or the other. This was written into law that has not been overturned, but there have been new edicts that come out to neutralize an already existing edict. And certain states in the United States of America do not allow for the new edict to neutralize their old edict. I just said something so far deeper than you want to admit. You're going to have to catch that. So until you understand the Constitution of the United States of America, you as an African-American descendant of slave, you will always be operating in a vein that you think you have entitlement to, and you don't. And they laugh at you. And that's why they can treat us the way that they do. I'm sorry. It's a fact. Martin Luther King tried to explain it to you. Malcolm X tried to explain it to you. Frederick Douglass tried to explain it to you. Marcus Garvey tried to explain it to you. And then we have all those who helped to release people from slavery, only to find out later on that once they got many people free from slavery, we were in a different version of slavery and different type of incarceration over time. So the people who have authority realized that there was a human movement and a global concern for humanitarian causes, now have said, all right, well, we'll just recolor it. We'll just rebox it. We'll just reuse it in a different vein. And I'm sorry to be I'm not sorry. I'm happy to be the bearer of this information to you. I don't say this in arrogance. I don't say this in conceit. I say this in concern, because we're going to keep dying. We're going to keep being redlined. We are going to keep being disenfranchised. Even though in faith we know that we are above only and not beneath, head only and not tail. I live and walk in that. There are ways to get there, but it's just not the way that we're doing it. But this is where, if we really want change, we have to change what made the standard. And that's the law. Instead of running from the law, I need you to start raising your children up to run to the law. Instead of running from the police, I need you to start raising your children up to run towards becoming the police, the law enforcement officers, and not these deputized ignoramuses who happen to have clubs, bats, staves, and knives, who, when they need to catch a property of a slave owner, will catch that property, don't know what to do, don't understand the psychology of a person who's dealing with such oppression in mind, and just dragging them down and beating them. And because of a little bit of so-called resistance, now you feel you need to positively end this person's life. See, that's what you're dealing with in your police force. I don't care what anybody got to say about that. Because it's fact, and we can prove it. We're going to always run into problems with the police because the law enforcement officers only enforce the law. I sat and watched over this weekend multiple videos of dash cam, body cam footage of officers encountering non-African descendants of slaves, whether they are of Latin descent from different countries, whether they are of Caucasoid, I don't care where they're from, sitting here in the United States. One guy wrestled with the chief of police, and he still lives today. Wrestled with him after the police grabbed him by his neck, dropped him on his back, jumped on top of him. The guy knew how to wrestle, wiggled out of it, got back on top of the police officer, and then let the cop go. The cop never said, stop resisting. You're going to learn today. The cop never said, stop resisting to this Caucasian. I watched another video of a young man who had a mental disorder. It was obvious, it was acute, but it was real. And this man begins to fight two officers, disarms one, punches the other, steals the vehicle as he escapes two officers trying to hold him, grabs their vehicle and their gun, puts it in the cab of the car and drives off. And the person say, oh, don't, just call it in and let him know that the car has been taken. And there is nobody shooting after the car. There's no one saying stop resisting. They're just saying, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. They're not saying stop resisting. They're not shooting this man. They're not tasing this man. No Billy Cub came out to crack him in his forehead. None of this took place, and the man took the car and drove off. And then they went to the house and arrested the man. Guns not drawn, knocked on the door, says, hey, is Bobby here? Then I have a man in Buffalo, targets a neighborhood, goes into this African-American and multiple cultured environment because of his perceived dominance and his entitlement, and shoots up this store and shoots everything he sees, comes out of the store, tracked and cashed up tens of deaths, tens of injuries. He's put in the back of a car, full body gear, still got extra ammo, assault weapons on his person. I have a young boy playing in the backyard at dark in a park, playing cops and robbers by himself at the age of 12. And because he's holding the weapon and the police already seeing this black boy, they shoot him dead. I have another young man, Caucasian, goes down into Carolina, sees another church he doesn't like, goes in, shoots at random people that are not of his descent, not of his race, and then they take this joker to Burger King on the way to the police department. They ask him if he's thirsty. As I've told you about the situation with several individuals that I know, one of them stands out most for me is my stepfather, my mother's husband, many years back when he was beaten by batons by the police because he was in his own neighborhood doing his own thing and got pulled over for whatever reason. He decided to carry the chase to the block he came off of. They then come down and they take him out and they begin to beat him with a billy club. No questions asked. They just beat him because he got out the car. He made them drive an extra mile. I got stories of my father's, that man's friends, who I watched and heard the billy clubs crack their skulls like baseballs hitting from an aluminum bat in the baseball field park. I'm watching other black men wives trying to restrain their husbands from jumping on these police in our neighborhood. And then the police pull out their guns and shoot in the air just to scare us back, not realizing all you did was drive us to go back into the hood, bring out our guns, and we will finish this. This is what I've raised seeing. And now that I understand it better, I realize that we have to take certain types of approaches, and it's not going to be your protests. It's going to be your education. It's going to be your propagating for change in law. And I don't mean just screaming it from a rostrum and a pulpit. I mean, go to school, get your education for law, and then come up with legislative movements that cannot be shot down because you use the Constitution of America to get them before the courts and have them implemented. Your energy is not going to do anything unless it's driven to that direction. So here's why we came here with this. We talked about this earlier about the police and why we're having this big issue with the police, okay? Let me just recap something that we talked about. The history from back in 13th century. Now I'm reading from the New Yorker. I'm reading from the article that again is The Invention of the Police by Jill DePloya. And it states that the history in England in the 13th century, and I read most of this to you on last broadcast. The history of police, P-O-L-I-S, not P-O-L-I-C-E, began in England. Well, actually, it's a Greek word for police, meaning the citizen, and then it turned and has now matured and has grown and evolved into a new phrase that we use commonly throughout the world, and we call it the policia, the police, which means protecting the rights, in essence, of the citizens. Right? So in America, we use the phrase to protect and to serve. Now go back to part one and you'll hear everything up until this point. I'm going to continue from here. You'll get the point, and then we're going to end the proceeding word for the day. I hope you guys are being educated and somewhat informed, and at least you know the rhythm for why we're here. Why did I go through all of that in the beginning? Because I had a nasty break, an unfortunate break in the series, and I got to recap where we come from. So the history begins in England in the 13th century when maintaining the king's peace became the duty of an officer of the court, who was then called a constable. Aided by his watchman, every male adult could be called on to take a turn walking a ward at night, and if trouble came, to raise a hue and a cry. This practice lasted for a century, okay? And one of the ways that they referenced this in the New Yorker's writing of The Invention of the Police was the George Zimmerman scenario when Trayvon Martin in 2012 was actually shot because Zimmerman was serving as neighborhood watch. Now, the watch didn't work especially well in England, and the average constable was an ignoramus who knows little or nothing about the law. Now, I am not offending my law enforcement officers who go to school to study law, criminal law, and understand it. But I want to make sure we emphasize there is still an issue with criminal law. I will dig deeply into that in another week to come. So the average constable, based on this writing of this article in the New Yorker called The Invention of the Police by Miss Jill, states that that person under that time was ignorant. They knew little about the law. Now, Blackstone wrote that it didn't work especially well in England's colonies. Rich men paid poor men to take their turn on the watch. So if you were supposed to, as the community, all take a day to watch, the rich men would actually pay the poor men, hey, won't you walk for me, right? Or they would pay the older men, won't you walk for me? Okay, understand how this is working. So the rich men would pay the poor men to take their turn on watch, which meant that most watchmen were either very elderly or very poor. Thereby, the poor was pretty much exhausted from working all day. Now, Boston established a watch in 1631. New York tried paying watchmen in 1658. Philadelphia did it in 1705. And the governor there expressed the view that the militia could make the city safer than these men on the watch. But the militia weren't supposed to police the king's subjects. They were supposed to serve the common defense, thereby waging wars against the French, fighting native police or people who were trying to hold on to their land or suppressing the slave rebellion. Let me give you a flashback of time. That means that in Philadelphia at that time, they were still the militia fighting Native Americans, not these foreigners who set up colonies, but fighting Native Americans. These foreigners are trying to push out of their land because you feel you can do better with it. Just keep that in your head so we understand where we're going and how we got to today. So now, this is what happened in 1705. Now, these militia, they were not designed to police the king's subjects. I'm going to repeat it. They were supposed to serve the common defense, meaning in this setup, they were supposed to wage war against the French, and they were supposed to be fighting the native people who were trying to hold on to their land. And they were also, the militia, supposed to be suppressing slave rebellion. I'm talking about your police. Listen, the government of slavery was not a rule of law. It was a rule of police. In 1661, the English colony of Barbados passed the first slave law. Revised in 1688, it decreed that Negroes and other slaves were completely unqualified, wholly unqualified to be governed by laws of their nation. And they devised instead a special set of rules for the good regulating and ordering of them. Again, this is where I believe you have the core of criminal law. I'll talk about that in the weeks to come. I promise you, I'm going to make you consider some stuff you've not been looking at, not to be controversial or be in conspiracy theory with anything, just facts, people. And we want to know why we can't get through some stuff. And then how do we apply the Bible to this? How do we apply the kingdom life to this? Just keep listening. And if you don't, that's on you. It'll be on replay. Go back and visit it. Some of you might think I'm arrogant. Some of you might think I'm conceited. Some of you might think I'm pompous. I want you to know, I want you to live. And sometimes we are the reason we die, because we do not follow a kingdom principle that says in all you're getting, get understanding. And just because you're getting something doesn't mean you understand what you're getting. And you don't understand what taking it actually indicts and or sells you into. So the government of slavery was not the rule. It was the rule of the police. Now, again, I'm going to read this order that was put forward back in Barbados, that was adopted by Virginia in 1680 known as the Slave Code. This is the Slave Code. It shall not be lawful for any Negro or other slave to carry or arm himself with any club, staff, gun, sword, or any kind of weapon of defense or offense for that matter, nor shall they go or depart from his master's ground without a certificate from his master or mistress or overseer. And such permission should not be granted upon their particular and necessary occasion, except for particular and necessary occasions. And every Negro or slave so offending, not having a certificate as foresaid, shall be sent to the next constable, who is whereby enjoined and required to give the Negro 20 lashes on his bare back, well laid on, mind you, and so after that sent home to his said master, mistress, or overseer. That if any Negro or other slave shall absent himself from his master's service and lie hidden or lurking in obscure places, committing injurious to the inhabitants, and shall resist any person or persons that shall thereby lawfully and by lawful authority be employed to apprehend and take said Negro, that then in case of such resistance, it shall be lawful for such person or persons to kill the said Negro or slave so lying out and resisting. Until we, the African-American community of the United States of America, realize that we are still slaves to America, we don't understand why they cry, stop resisting. We don't understand why Trump was able to say in an attempt or a potential riot to pull the guard out and say, if you're going to loot, then we're going to shoot. The law enforcers have done something, and you are thereby a slave to these institutions that you are looting and rioting because you work for them. Pay attention before you think I'm tripping. He was about to call the National Guard in on y'all down there on those melanated bodies rioting over a travesty. The president of the United States, the head of our legal system, because he knows the law. One thing that individual knew was the law. At least he put enough lawyers around him that they could all come up with reasons to justify anything by the law. Listen closely. In the 18th century, a New York person held as a slave could not gather in a group of more than 3, could not ride a horse, could not hold a funeral at night, could not be out after hours after sunset without a lantern, and could not sell anything, Indian corn, peaches, or fruit from the streets. And they had a stop and frisk or stop and whip or a stop and shoot to kill law in place. Then there were slave patrols. This is what policing was doing, not the government, not the law of rule. And slavery was not a law of rule. It was a law of policing. Listen, there were slave patrols, armed Spanish bands called the Armades, who hunted runaways in Cuba, beginning in the 15th practice in the 1530s, a practice that was adopted by the English in Barbados a century later. It had a lot of common. It had a lot in common with England's possesses Passe Comitas, a band of stout men that a county sheriff could summons to chase down an escaped criminal. Again, that thing, criminal law. Y'all gonna learn what you don't know shortly. South Carolina, founded by the slave owners from Barbados, authorized its first slave patrol in 1702. Virginia followed in 1726. North Carolina, y'all know you don't go through North Carolina. I won't go through North Carolina to this day. To this day, I will not drive through North Carolina, because of the encounters I have each time I have driven in that state. So Carolina followed this same process in 1753. Slave patrols married the watch to the militia. So the watch, people roaming their neighborhoods and make sure everything was safe and protecting the king's properties, were now married to the militia, whose primary job was to fight against opposing French and type scenarios, fight against those Native Americans trying to hold on to their land, and the militia's responsibility to actually corral plantation owners' slaves and put down slaves who rebelled. The police. Now, to my dear law enforcement buddies and family members, y'all know I love y'all. I'm not coming for y'all. I'm just talking about the system that you guys have now been, fortunately, able to get employment within, and we need you there. But we also need to be informed. This is not just about paying mortgages. This is not just about having the diversity code affected and saying that we have diversity on our forces, when we, in fact, don't really pay attention to the origin. Now, you may say all things have changed. It ain't that barbaric. I believe that for a very long time. But the proof is in the pudding. And though we got people in there who are directly affected, your families are directly affected by it, there's little change that can be done at your level. Keep your job. The aid that you can help by being someone who can appreciate the mentality of what's coming and you're going after as a pursuit of a criminal. Because not every person that's being pursued by law is a criminal. And when you understand why a person ran, you can tell, hey, officers, hold up, wait, come here, man. Let me talk to you. There's a difference. But once that gets lost and that's become a numbing element, and you just like, because right now when I talk to officers and I counsel officers, they're like, we're just numb. Everybody, we can't trust nobody. We can't trust preachers. We can't trust judges. We can't trust attorneys. They all lie. I mean, the law is the law, and they done broke it. And now they're trying to find ways because they got money to hide it. This is what I know, not what I heard. This is what I know. So when you become numb as one who can produce some moniker of change, not the really effective change, but at least in one situation on the streets, you can help diffuse a overzealous individual who feels that they are some god in the earth because they got a badge and a gun and a backup plan that's out of this world. And if they should make the mistake or actually take the pleasure in taking a life, they might get away with it. Until I see that change, you can't tell me things have changed. And until I see that change in where it's disproportionately applied, do not tell me things are different. I want them to be. I'm with you. I'm with you. But I'm burying too many people. I'm helping and praying with too many mothers who, though their son was down on the street, selling weed, is in jail for 75 years because they sold 2 joints. And you just caught this businessman using his business plane, bringing in 89,000 tons of heroin, which is killing our Black communities. And you gave this joker 6 months parole. Yeah, until I see these changes, miss me with all of that. I love you. I'm praying for you. Want you to come home safely to your family every night, hoping that when you get stops and when you get to work with these people and you're doing domestic violence cases and you're doing all these rape cases and these egregious scenarios that you got to contend with, that one, you have peace of mind and that you are able to do this without prejudice, but by the law and within justice. But I'm not going to be convinced at this stage, after all my years of advocating, and I will always advocate between law enforcement and community better relationships. I'm not seeing things change. And the reason is it's written to this end. And then when they hire people like us to go in and allow us to go in and be a part of this system, they inundate us with these different policies and procedures, but never tell us the core of why the actual policing starts. They themselves don't even know. But when you go back and just read the history, you understand that there is a reason there are others treated a certain way. So when you call in your stop, what should we do? The law says da 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 da. You do what that law says, but if you don't know why that law was written, the law for this stop is different from the law for that stop. I said that out loud and intentionally. I got an African-American male. He's 6'2", driving, da, 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 da. I have a Caucasian male, 6'2", driving. The laws are different. Now, some of you are going to come for me, and I know you're LEOs. I know you're going to come for me for this one. Man, I love y'all. Please don't do it. Talk to me first. But some of y'all know I'm telling the truth. And I'm not trying to give our people out here any type of ammunition to just be anxious and upset with you. I want every child to appreciate, respect, love, and know what you stand for, that when they're in trouble, my melanated community, we don't run to you when we're in trouble. We're afraid of you. We're afraid of the blue. We're afraid of the green. We're afraid of the gray and blue. And we're definitely afraid of the all black uniforms. So please let me help make headway into how to bring us together in unity. And the only way we can do that is to understand how things were constructed. And we got to break down the construct. I did not say defund the police. That is idiotic. But we do have to reform the police. Because right now, the present definition is still this definition. And until this definition changes, the laws don't change. For a Black American, 6'2" male, Caucasian American, 6'2", whatever, the law changes based on information when it's called in. And though you know one thing, you need to understand it is completely different. Listen closely. So in 1726, Virginia made this thing. The slave patrol was then married to the watch, to the militia, serving on patrol as required by all able-bodied men. Often the patrol was mustered from the militia. The patrollers used the hue and the cry to call for anyone within hearing distance to join the chase. That's where you get citizens arrests from, whether y'all realize that or not. I'm just giving y'all real history. People don't like to talk about because we're trying to be popular. I want you to live, and I want you to understand why we're having the conflicts we're having. Look at the next piece. She writes this very beautifully. Again, this article is from the New Yorker. You can go to newyorker.com. We've got it posted on Facebook if you're viewing. We got it posted on Clubhouse if you're there. Just go read it. It's called The Invention of the Police. Now, it says here in very clear terms, and I can vet all of this. I'm not just reading it because she wrote it. She writes it. She writes it a way that I don't now have to go back and put my own speech together, because everything she's saying I can vet and take you to the places that vets it. She just wrote it. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. She's done a wonderful job, and I can vet everything except one thing she wrote in here. So in 1979, let me finish this. Neither was the watch, nor the militia, nor the patrols The police, who were French and considered despotic. In North America, the French city of New Orleans was distinctive in having this phrase, la police, armed city guards who wore military-style uniforms and received wages. They were an urban slave patrol. So in 1779, Thomas Jefferson created a chair called Law and Police at a college of William and Mary. The meaning of the word began to change. So in 1789, Jeremy Bentham, noting that police had recently entered the English language in something like its modern sense, it made this distinction. Police keep the peace. Justice punishes disorder. No justice, no peace. Get it? That's why Black Lives Matter protesters were crying this in the streets, and thereby only those who understood the law to make the actual mantra understood it, and the rest of y'all just ran with it. Keep moving, Jones. Then in 1797, a London magistrate named Patrick Colomb published a treatise on the police of the metropolis. He too distinguished peace kept in the streets from justice that would be administered by the courts. Police were responsible for the regulation and the correction of behavior and the prevention and the detention of crimes. It is often said that Britain created the police and the United States copied it. One could argue that the reverse is true. Colomb spent his teen and early years in colonial Virginia. He had served as an agent for British cotton manufacturers. He owned shares in sugar plantations throughout Jamaica. He knew all about slave codes. He knew all about slave patrols, but nothing came of Colomb's ideas about policing until 1829, when Home Secretary Robert Peel, in the wake of a great deal of labor unrest, and after years of suppressing Catholic rebellions in Ireland, in his capacity as the Irish Secretary, he persuaded Parliament to establish the Metropolitan Police, a force of some 3,000 men headed by 2 civilian justices who were later called commissioners, and organized like an army, with each superintendent overseeing 4 inspectors, 16 sergeants, and 165 constables who wore coats and pants of blue with black top hats, each assigned a numbered badge and a baton. Londoners came to call these bobbies for Bobby Peels. Now, it is also often said that modern American urban policing began in 1838 when the Massachusetts legislation authorized the hiring of police officers in Boston. This too ignores the role of slavery in the history of the police. This too ignores the role of slavery in the history of the police. So in 1829, a Black abolitionist in Boston named David Walker published this writing, an appeal to the colored citizens of the world, calling for violent rebellion. One good Black man can put to death 6 white men. Now, Walker was found dead within a year. Boston thereafter had a series of mob attacks against abolitionists, including an attempt to Willie Lynch Lloyd Garrison, the publisher of The Liberator in 1835. Walker's words terrified Southern slave owners. The governor of North Carolina wrote to his senators of his state, this statement: I beg you will lay this matter before the police of your town. I beg you lay this matter before the police of your town and invite their prompt attention to the necessity of arresting the circulation of the book by police. He meant slave patrols. This was in response to Walker's appeal. North Carolina, them jokers formed a statewide patrol committee to deal with this matter. Now, New York established a police department in 1844. New Orleans, Cincinnati followed in 1852. Then later in the 1850s, Philadelphia, Chicago, Baltimore. Now, population growth, the widening inequality brought about by the Industrial Revolution and the rise in such crimes as prostitution, burglary, contributed to the emergence of urban policing. So did immigration, especially from Ireland and Germany, and the hostilities to immigration. A new party, the Know Nothings, they were called the Know Nothings, they sought to prevent immigration from voting. They fought to prevent the immigrants from voting, from holding office, from becoming citizens. So in 1854, Boston disbanded its ancient watch and formally established the police department. That year, Know Nothings swept the city's elections. American police differed from their English counterparts. In the US, police commissioners, as political appointees, fell under local control, which with limited supervision. The law enforcement was decentralized, resulting in a jurisdictional thicket. In 1857, the Great Police Riot, the New York Municipal Police, ran by the mayor's office. They fought literally on the steps of City Hall with the New York Metropolitan Police, which was ran by the state. Then Metropolitans were known as the New York Mets. That year, an amateur baseball team of the same name was founded. Also, unlike our British counterparts, American police carried guns. Initially in their own, in the 1860s, the Colt Firearm Company began manufacturing a compact revolver called a pocket police model long before the Metropolitan Police began issuing service weapons. American police carried guns because Americans carried guns also, including Americans who lived in the parts of the country they were hunting for food and defending their livestock from wild animals. So Americans who lived in parts of the country that had no police, the Americans who lived in the parts of North America that were not in the United States. Outside the big cities, law enforcement officers were scarce. In territories that weren't yet states, they were U.S. Marshals and their deputies of the federal courts who could act as de facto police, but only to enforce federal law. If a territory became a state, these United States of America. I pause here because you need to understand this legality. Watch this. If the state did not like the federal law, the state didn't have to comply with it, though it was federal law, until the federal law brought them into court. But by then, policing it at your state and city levels, a lot of things could have happened nefariously and otherwise. And you still have that element today. That's why the voter registration issue is so much of an issue. The feds say one thing, but the states can say what they want. And until that gets sued back and forth, the state sues the Fed sues the state, all of this stuff, if you guys don't pay attention to law, you're going to miss the whole purpose of why we can't get through the law, because the law still holds a great deal of meaning. So if a territory became a state, its counties would elect sheriffs. Meanwhile, Americans became vigilantes, especially likely to kill indigenous peoples and to lynch people of color. So between 1840 and the 1920s, mobs, vigilantes, and law officers, including the Texas Rangers, lynched some 500 Mexicans and Mexican Americans and killed thousands more, not only in Texas, but also in territories that became the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico. A San Francisco Vigilance Committee was established in 1851, arrested, tried, and hanged people. It boasted a membership in the thousands, and LA Vigilance Committee targeted and lynched its Chinese immigrants. The U.S. Army operated as a police force as well. After the Civilian War, the militia was organized into 7 new Department of Permanent Standing Armies: the Department of Dakota, the Department of Plateau, the Department of Missouri, Department of Texas, Department of Arizona, Department of California, Department of Columbia. In the 1870s and 80s, the U.S. Army engaged in more than 1,000 combat operations against Native peoples in 1890 at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, following an attempt to disarm Lakota settlement in a regiment of cavalrymen who massacred hundreds of Lakota men, women, and children. Nearly a century later, 1973, FBI agents, SWAT teams, and federal troops and state marshals laid siege to the place called Wounded Knee during a protest over a police brutality and failure to properly punish and torture and murder of a Oglala Sioux man named Raymond Yellow Thunder. They fired more than 500,000 rounds of ammunition and arrested more than 1,000 people. Today, according to the CDC, Native Americans are more likely to be killed by the police than any other racial or ethnic group. You know why? The same reason we have with the slaves, because it was written in that they would not become citizens of these United States. They were the reason you actually had militia to drive them off their land. Until you know that root and that core, that makes no sense to you. Now listen to this, because I want y'all to catch this. And many people find this very offensive and think that I should not be doing this as a person of the cloth. I'm just giving you the history. I'm going to tell you how the cloth deals with it once you understand the history. Modern American policing began in 1909. I told you about Vollmer. He became the chief of police in Berkeley, California. Vollmer refashioned American police into the American military. He'd served with the 8th Army Corps in the Philippines in 1898 for years, ever since the Spanish-American War. Ever since the Spanish-American War days. I've studied military practices and I've used them to good effect in rounding up crooks. He later explained, after all, we're conducting a war against enemies of society. Who were those enemies? You know, mobsters, bootleggers, watch this, socialist agitators, strikers, union organizers, immigrants, and Black people. This is his statement. Now keep reading. To domestic policing, Vollmer and his peers adapted the kinds of tactics and weapons that had been deployed against Native Americans in the West and against colonized peoples in other parts of the world, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, and socialists Julian Go has demonstrated. Vollmer instituted a training model imitated all over the country by police departments that were often led and staffed by other veterans of the United States wars of conquest and occupation. A police captain or lieutenant should occupy exactly the same position in the public mind as that of the captain or lieutenant in the Army of the United States of America. So Detroit's commissioner of police said this. Today's police officers are disproportionately veterans of the U.S. wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, many suffering from post-traumatic stress. The Marshall Project, which analyzes data from the Albuquerque police, found that officers who are veterans are more likely than non-veteran counterparts to be involved in the fatal shootings. In general, they are more likely to use force and more likely to fire their guns. I find that fact to be true, but I find it also disturbing that that fact does not get the conversation. It does distinguish how many of them are of what particular race. Doesn't say the African Americans who come back from these wars are the ones likely to engage in fatal shootings. I want to make sure we're very distinctive about that. So let me repeat this. Today's police officers are disproportionately U.S. veterans of different wars You know, we had Iraq, Afghanistan, many suffering from post-trauma stress. The Marshall Project, it's a real project, analyzes data from the Albuquerque police, found that officers who were veterans, doesn't say what color, are more likely than other non-veteran counterparts to be involved in fatal shootings. Now, in general, you just think officers, but remember, there is a difference because the Black officers are not the ones killing us. In general, they are more likely to use force and more likely to fire their guns. Vollmer era police enforced a new kind of slave. That slave code was called Jim Crow laws. Do you guys remember what Jim Crow was and is today? Which had been passed in the South beginning in the late 1870s and upheld by the Supreme Court in 1896. William G. Austin became Savannah's chief of police in 1907. Earlier, he had earned a Medal of Honor for his service in the U.S. Cavalry at Wounded Knee. He had also fought in Spanish-American War. So by 1916, African-American churches in the city were complaining to Savannah newspapers about the whole-scale arrests of Negroes because they are simply Negroes. Arrests that would not have been made if they were white or under similar circumstances. African Americans also confronted Jim Crow policing in the northern cities, to which they increasingly fled. James Robinson, Philadelphia's chief of police, beginning in 1912, had served in the infantry under the Spanish-American War and the Philippine War. He based his forces training on manuals used by the U.S. Army at Leavenworth. Go reports that in 1911, about 11% of people arrested were African American. Under Robinson, that number rose to 14.6% by 1917. By the 1920s, a quarter of those arrests were African Americans, who at the time represented only 7.4% of the population. So progressive era Vollmer, his style policing criminalized being Black, and as the historian Khalil Gibran Muhammad argued in his 2010 book, The Commendation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and Making of Modern Urban America. Police patrolled Black neighborhoods and arrested Black people disproportionately. Prosecutors indicated Black people disproportionately. Prosecutors indicted Black people disproportionately. Juries found Black people guilty disproportionately. Judges gave Black people disproportionately long sentences. And then after all this, social scientists, observing the number of Black people in jail, decided that as a matter of biology, Black people were disproportionately inclined to criminality. More recently, between the new Jim Crow and the criminalizing of immigration and of imprisonment of immigrants in detention centers, this reality has grown worse by population, by per capita incarceration rates, and by expenditures. The United States exceeds all other nations in how many of its citizens, asylum seekers, and undocumented immigrants are under some form of criminal justice supervision. Muhammad writes in a new preface to his book, the number of African American and Latinx people in American jails and in prison today exceeds the entire population of some African and Eastern European and Caribbean countries. Policing grew harsher in the progressive era. And with the emergence of state police forces, the number of police grew too. With the rise of the automobile, like in California, began the highway patrols. Others, including the state police in Nevada, Colorado, Oregon, began as private parliamentaries and industrialists, which employed the newest American immigrants, Hungarians, Italians, Jews. Industrialists in Pennsylvania established the iron and coal police to end strikes, to bust up unions, including the United Mine Workers. In 1905, 3 years after an anthracite coal strike, the the Pennsylvania police started operations. One state policeman should be able to handle 100 foreigners, its new chief said. The U.S. Border Patrol began in 1924, the year Congress restricted immigrants from Europe, Southern Europe. At the insistence of Southern and Western agriculturalists, Congress exempted Mexico from its new immigration quotas in order to allow immigrant workers to enter the United States. The Border Patrol began as a relatively small outfit responsible for enforcing federal immigration law, stopping smugglers at all the national borders. In the middle decades of the 20th century, it grew to a national quasi-military focused on policing and southern borders, policing of the southern borders in campaigns of mass arrests and forced deportations of Mexican immigrants aided by local police like the notoriously brutal LAPD, as the historian Kelly Little Hernandez has chronicled. Now, I am not fighting against Border Patrol. I am not fighting against anything. I want you to understand the history so you can see how things have developed. Now, listen to these next points. What became of Chicano movement began in South California with Mexican immigrants protests of the LAPD during the first half of the 20th century, even as a growing film industry cranked out features about the Klansmen hunting Black people, cowboys killing Indians, the police chasing Mexicans. More recently, you can find an updated version of this story in LA Noire, a video game that's set in 1947. Now, I want to move to another piece. Two kinds of police appeared on mid-century American television. The good guys solved crime on primetime police procedurals like Dragnet, 1957, Adam 12, 1968. Both featured the LAPD. Now, the bad guys shocked America's conscience on the nightly news. Arkansas state troopers barring Black students from entering a Little Rock Central High School in 1957. Birmingham police clubbing and arresting some 700 Black children protesting segregation in 1963. Alabama state troopers beating voting rights marchers in Selma in 1965. These two faces of policing help explain how, in the 1960s, more people protested police brutality, more money governments gave, the more money that governments gave to their police departments. In 65, Lyndon Johnson declared war on crime, asked Congress to pass a Law Enforcement Assistance Act, under which the federal government would supply local police with military-grade weapons that were being used in the war in Vietnam during the riots of Watts that summer. Law enforcement killed during the riots in Watts that year. Law enforcement officers killed 31 people, arrested more than 4,000 fighting the protesters. The head of the LAPD said was very much like fighting the Viet Cong. That's a statement that they made, not one I endorse. Now, preparing for a Senate vote just days after the uprising ended, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee said, "For some time, it has been my feeling that the task of law enforcement agencies is really not much different from military forces, namely to deter crime before it occurs, just as our military objective is the deterrence of aggression." As Elizabeth Hinton reported in her article, "From the War of Poverty to the War on Crime, the Making of Mass Incarceration in America." The frontline soldiers in Johnson's War on Crime, Baltimore era policing all over again, spent a disproportionate amount of time patrolling Black neighborhoods, arresting Black people. Policymakers concluded from those differential arrest rates that Black people were just prone to criminality, with the result that police spent even more of their time patrolling Black neighborhoods, which led to a still higher arrest rate. If we wish to rid this country of crime, if we wish to stop hacking at its branches only, we must cut its roots and drain its swampy breeding ground, which are called the slums. Lyndon Johnson told an audience of police policymakers in 1966. The next year, the riots broke out in Newark and in Detroit. Y'all ain't got to talk to me. You might find this offensive. You may be afraid to go any further with me, but you're not going to miss these historical facts. We ain't riding against you whites, one Newark man told the police reporter, not long before being shot dead by the police. We're rioting against police brutality. In Detroit, police arrested more than 7,000 people. Johnson's society essentially ended when he asked Congress to pass the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act, which had the effect of diverting money from social programs to policing the neighborhoods the social programs were supposed to be helping. Think. This magazine called it a piece of the demagoguery devised out of a malevolence and enacted in hysteria. James Baldwin attributes it to irresponsible ferocity, to some pale, compelling nightmare, an overwhelming collection of private nightmares. The truth was darker. As the socialist Stuart Schrader chronicled in his 2019 book, Badges Without Borders, how global counterinsurgencies transformed American policing. During the Cold War, the Office of Public Safety, which was called USAID, provided assistance to the police in at least 52 countries and training to the officers from nearly 80 for the purpose of encountering insurgencies. Or for the purpose of countering insurgencies, the suppression of an anticipated revolution, that collection of private nightmares, as the OPS reported. It contributed the international dimension to the administration's war on crime, counterinsurgency boomerang, and came back to the United States as policing. So does it sound odd that we're a people who have these group of private nightmares? So it's your job to make sure that they never let those private nightmares become a response and a reaction and an insurgency. So you are you are trying to get ahead and counter any potential insurgencies. Is that why there's constant policing of our neighborhoods and not others? See, if you're from another country, you don't understand this dilemma. And you would think it normal because of the propagating and the propaganda that goes into other countries about the African-American communities, which along with that goes how, in fact, you can come into America, and if you go put a business in the African-American community, because they don't know how to spend money, they just buy whatever, and if you got what they're buying, they will use you and you can get rich. And yet those African-American communities cannot do the very same thing for themselves, but other foreigners can. See, there is a whole system, it's cyclical, of mental, psychological, and physical oppression. And that physical oppression takes on a myriad of fronts. In 1968, Johnson's new crime bill established that Law Enforcement Assistance Administration within the Justice Department, and he did that, which in the next decade and a half dispersed federal funds to more than 8,000 crime control projects. Even funds intended for social projects, which would mean youth employment, for instance, for instance, along with other health, education, housing, and welfare programs, they went to the police. In specific neighborhoods. With Richard Nixon, any element of the Great Society that had survived the disastrous end of Johnson's presidency were drastically cut. With an increased emphasis on policing and prison building, more Americans went to prison between 1965 and 1982 than they did between 1965 and 1964. Let me repeat that. More Americans went to prison between 1965 and 1982 than they did between 1865 and 1964. This is what Hinton reports. Under Ronald Reagan, still more social services were closed and cut down, starved of funding until they died. Mental hospitals, health centers, jobs programs, early childhood education. Let me tell y'all what that means. In Reagan's era, I lived it. I lived in Nixon. But when we were younger, we had a lot more programs to help, not like welfare for handing out to people who could not, but if you were going through whatever you went through, for instance, the families were helped. Listen, the families were helped in the Nixon and in the Reagan era by programs such as CETA. Okay. And CETA was a program that helped students who were in school have summer jobs. They also incorporated helping for citizens in the community and students in the community to actually be able to, if you were in your junior year of high school, get a job part-time while you were in school. And if your grades were right, you could do part-time school and part-time job, getting used to it. So when the summer came, you were already in a job that the government was subsidizing companies that would help, or the city itself would put on programs for cleaning, parks, whatever, accounting, almost like internship, right? This is what I know, not what I'm hearing. I know this. And CETA got cut under Reagan. So now you don't have people like myself making money legally. And all of a sudden you got police showing up in neighborhoods to police the neighborhoods, more so than the police who were on the beat, who knew the neighborhood, knew the people. And then you got people who are the police coming in, and if you looked at them weird, they trying to be all bullyish with you. And the boys and the students and the children are being targeted, but the boys and the students and the children, the girls, would not be targeted if they were in the CETA program, because they would have been at work during the days. They were out being children in the summertime at the parks, and then they might not have been smoking weed like they were. They might not have been selling weed and joke and blow and crank and speed and hash like they were. Don't let these facts evade your mind to understand how we got here historically. Then I'm going to tell you the kingdom perspective. I'm giving you the history so we can tell you how we're supposed to operate. We got this for 2 more days. I'm almost done. Just give me another couple seconds. So with Nixon, many of the elements of the Great Society under Reagan, more social services were closed and starved. By 2016, 18 states were spending more money on prisons than colleges and universities. Activists who today call for defunding of the police argue that for decades, Americans have been defunding not only social services, but in many states, public education itself. The more frayed the social fabric, the more police have been deployed to trim the dangling threads. So if we're not being educated by the prior funds that have been now redirected to the police, if we're not able to get jobs that help keep people active, learning to be responsible citizens, not that lazy people should work, but no, or should be giving resources, but people who are willing to work, and there is work to be done. The streets were cleaner, the parks were cleaner. We did a lot of different things. There was less arrests, and now that you don't have the CETA program, the Summer Employment Training Assistance is what that was called. The city's CETA, I forget what it was, Cities Employment Training Association, or AID, CETA. And the children could get jobs. If you were up, you had working papers, you went to work, and you were working during the summer, not sitting around all day with nothing to do, trying to find something to do and getting yourself in trouble. But instead, you now cut that funding, which is major money. You've cut the sources of welfare and education and tutoring programs. And now you wonder why you call the prisoners ignorant, because you've done away with all the things that could have helped them become educational. But the way you fixed it, when they become nefarious, when they become in trouble, now you bring the police in to clip that and then put them in incarceration. They learn in one way or another. But what you've done to make that happen has now made a false narrative about the quality of the lives of the people that are now incarcerated. And now they can never, once incarcerated, have a life that they could have had. And I say never, because once they're labeled, once you've been incarcerated, that sticks with you. Once you've been charged with felonies, I don't care what they tell you about expungement. That mess is still on your record. And is disproportionately associated to the melanation nation. Y'all gonna learn today. I'm not being mean. I'm just giving y'all facts so we can learn how to be proper and seek peace and do it right and get where we gotta go to. We gotta occupy till he come. Let's talk about how we got here. Are you guys learning anything today? Should I stop? Y'all tired of me talking Clubhouse? Because I can stop. I know this program is for y'all. Some of y'all might not even be from this country, may not even care what we're talking about, but I'm hoping that this aids as many as possible. Y'all all right with this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, keep talking.
Yes, sir.
My goodness.
So now listen. In 2016, 18 states spent more money on prisons than on colleges, universities. Activists today who are calling for the defunding of the police argue that for decades, Americans have been defunding not only social services, but in many states, police education itself. The more frayed the social fabric, the more police have been deployed to trim the dangling threads. The blueprint of law enforcement from Nixon to Reagan came from the Harvard political scientist James Q. Wilson between 1968 in his book called Varieties of Police Behavior. In 1982, in an essay in the Atlantic titled Broken Windows, on the one hand, Wilson believed that the police should shift from enforcing the law to maintaining order by patrolling on foot and doing what can be called community policing. Some of his recommendations were ignored. Wilson called for the other officials to handle what he termed the service functions of the police: first aid, rescuing cats, helping ladies, and the like, which is a reform people are asking for today. On the other hand, Wilson called for police to arrest people for petty crimes on the theory that they contributed to more serious crimes. Wilson's work informed programs like Detroit's Stress, which means Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets, that begun in 1971, in which Detroit police patrolled the city undercover in disguises that included everything from taxi drivers to radical college professors to killed so. Let me repeat this again. There was a program called Detroit's Stress. The program meant Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets. It began in 71. In which Detroit police patrolled the city undercover. meaning they were in disguises that included everything from a taxi driver to a radical college professor. And that killed so many young Black men that an organization of Black police officers demanded that the unit be disbanded. The campaign to end stress arguably marked the very beginnings of police abolitionism. Stress, stop robberies, enjoy safe streets, defended its methods. We don't just walk up and shoot somebody, the commander said. We ask him to stop. If he doesn't stop, we shoot. For decades, the war on crime was bipartisan and had substantial support from the Congress Black Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus. Crime is a national defense problem. Now, President Joe Biden said in the Senate when he was back in 1982, you're in such jeopardy in the streets as you are from a Soviet missile. You're in as much jeopardy in the streets as you are from a Soviet missile. Biden and other Democrats in the Senate introduced legislation that resulted in a Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. A decade later, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Biden helped draft the Violent Crimes Control Law Enforcement Act, whose provisions included mandatory sentencing. And in May of 1991, 2 months after Rodney King's beating, Biden introduced the Police Officers Bill Act, Police Officers Bill of Rights, which provided protection for police under investigation. Now, the NRA, National Rifle Association, first endorsed the presidential candidate Reagan in 1980. The Fraternal Order of Police, the nation's largest police union, first endorsed the presidential candidate George H.W. Bush in 1988, and in 1996, it endorsed Bill Clinton, partly because of Biden's record of championing law enforcement. The National Association of Police Organizations endorsed the Obama-Biden ticket, the Obama-Biden ticket in 2008 and in 2012. In 2014, after police in Ferguson, Missouri shot Michael Brown, the Obama administration established a task force on policing in the 21st century. Its report argued that police had become warriors when what they really should have become was guardians. Most of its recommendations were never implemented. In 2016, the Fraternal Order of Police endorsed Mr. Trump, saying that our members believe he will make America safe again. Police unions are lining up behind Trump again this year. We will never abolish our police or our great Second Amendment, Trump said at Mount Rushmore on the occasion of the 4th of July. We will not be intimidated by bad, evil people. Now, let me give y'all an understanding of this. Trump is not the king. The law is king. The police are not the king's men. They are public servants. And no matter how desperately Mr. Trump would like to make it so, policing really isn't a bipartisan issue, a partisan issue, not bipartisan. Let me repeat it. And no matter how desperately Trump would like to make it so, policing really isn't a partisan issue. Out of the stillness of the shutdown, the voices of protest have roared like summer thunder. An overwhelming majority of Americans of both parties support major reform in American policing, and a whole lot of policing defy their unions. A whole lot of police defy their unions. They also support those reforms. Those changes won't address plenty of bigger cries, not least because the problem of policing can't be solved without addressing the problem of guns. I don't necessarily agree with that. But this much is clear. The police, P-O-L-I-S, has definitely changed. And the police will also have to change. Those changes won't address plenty of the bigger cries. An earlier version of this piece misrepresented the number of Americans between the ages of 15 and 34 who were treated as a result of police inflicted injuries in the emergency rooms. My job today is to simply make sure that you guys understand, I think, a very intelligent and factual article, one of which I don't have time to sit down and write it, but I have time to read all that was written and vet all that was written. And so we must first understand the state of the union we are in. And as an individual who was directly affected by this, I'm not sympathetic to this cause. I'm empathetic. And many who may even be melanated and may feel as if they're empathetic are not. Sympathy and empathy are two different things. Similar, familiar, but different. Even to the point that someone who is sympathetic with the cause may go along, but someone who is empathetic of the cause will see it to its end. Sympathy might not go all the way. Empathy, this is our life. Sympathy, oh, that's so bad. Oh, I can't believe I can't believe that took, no, let's start a movement. Let's go. Empathy, and we're not starting a movement. Those of us who are feeling this pain, dealing in this pain, constantly being oppressed by this pain, we have to move. Now we got to move wisely. Empathy and sympathy, two different things. So when my dear brothers and my sisters tell me how we are, with you on this, I got to say to you, with all due respect, even though Malcolm X was very, very, very rude in how he put some people who wanted, based on sympathy and humanitarianism in heart, he had to make it clear there's nothing you can do for us. And people took those sound clips to make it sound like he was telling them to do this, that, and the other. They said, what can we do? The greatest question they could have asked to his response. And then he began to tell them. But when he did, they were like, we can't. We can't. That's sympathy. And you can't have empathy unless you've lived what we're talking about. So when I make these statements about a Black American citizen and the state of the Black American citizen, I'm not talking about a Black Lives Matter movement. That's sympathy. Literally, it's sympathy with good intentions, established by a people before the momentum took place who do have empathy. But then when the wheel starts going and the car starts moving, sympathy takes over. Empathy is no longer in charge. Empathy is just riding on the bus. And when empathy is needed, then sympathy pulls over and says, will you show your face? Yeah, I'm not with that. So from an empathetic posture, from a real life, I stand on this front line, aware of every door I just opened. Some y'all might not even know about, but I will hear about it legally later. I'm not for defunding the police. The police should be funded. And if defunding is going to talk about making sure that we remove some of the things that are causing the ill and disproportionate incarceration, sentencing, arrests, and deaths of a people you took resources from for the very sole purpose of possibly countering perceived insurrections in neighborhoods you have forced into oppression, and now their private and multiple nightmares they keep living out, and yet trying to obey the law constantly get smacked back as if they are, as stated, only 3/5 of a human in this country, which means any other country, as a citizen of this country, we're even less than that to them there. And there's no place for us to go to. And we are here, back against wall, foot and feet on ground, sometimes with shoes and sometimes without. We have to stand. We have to prove our value. And we have to stop as African Americans in America finding and needing welfare. We have to stop. Are we a part of our own problem? Absolutely we are. Should we be formalizing ourselves better and stop being crabs in a basket because it's a damnable concept? Yes, we should. But then again, when we do come together, we also need to be able to have the discernment to know when an insurrectionist is being plotted and planted within our camp. And when we don't know what's being planted within our camp, we are giving ourselves away. So if someone comes in and says, I can sell your music, just let me get started, you can't go taking every deal, because all money ain't good money. And at the end of the day, with the amount of theft that comes from these quote unquote ghetto, ratchet, unlearned, uneducated monkeys, all of these pieces have been told to us. But yet you steal everything we have and market it. We can't even keep a phrase, let alone a song. And everything that has ever been invented by these monkeys is right now helping to move technology forward at rates and levels that we had not even anticipated. Surely the engineers and the inventors didn't, before they were discredited and or buried under the pile that they were the ones who came up with the concept. See, I'm going to take this thing deeper than some of y'all want to deal with. So if you want to protest, let's do protesting right. I am hurting. And I don't think I can ever fake that. Fortunately, we have a kingdom. We are in this unfortunate world, but we are not of it when you are in his kingdom. And the pain and hurt that we may feel, Yahweh is able to mend. But every time I come back into my 6 days of work, we revisit every attack against what we believe and stand for. And then we're forced to make decisions about how we view our cousins and our sisters and brothers, because they now have not had the same relationship with the Father that you and I have had, and they've done things that they felt they should do in their power. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, especially when it gets you in trouble with what is known as the law. Because in the kingdom, we must abide by the laws of the land. Some of them are derived from our actual tenets of faith, and some of them have been manipulated to actually become something that keeps you from ever accomplishing what you have the strong potential to accomplish. And it sounds like a actual story from some, what do we call those things? Conspiracy theory. It's not. This crap is real, and it's right here on our door, in our face, every day. And just because we got black LEOs on the force, they are driving a system that has this root. We need them there. We support them there. We need to get more people there, and more people who are better prepared and understanding of the history and the origin of what it means to police, the law systems, the judges, the constables, wherever you are on this planet, the parliamentarians, the congressmen, the commissioners, the aldermen, the mayor, the governor. There are a lot of things we who are African Americans don't understand because we have this appearance of freedom, because they give you a job and you can get money. It is basically, some of us must understand this, and I want you to make this a quote. Some of us must understand that in the face of what was real slavery, the rich people learned how to use you and I as banks. They could put money out there for us to take it because they knew we'd give it right back with interest. And we thought we were free because they gave us money, which gave them time to research and develop based on your techniques, based on your habits, based on your ways, based on what you feel, based on what you see. And then they turn around and give you products that you created. They stole it from you while you sat there and watched and did it and put it out there. They got a team to go in, dissect it, produce it, and voila, now you're buying it. And you created it. You don't have to like me today. I'm okay with that. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And the amount of sellouts within our melanated communities is real. Yes, Uncle Tom does exist. Now, there is a proper version of Uncle Tom who really helped the slaves, used his position of favor with the plantation owner to help keep slaves alive. And then you got the ones who got there and was like, look, I made it. That's on them. They can't get here. But there was only one spot for Uncle Tom on the farm. And if Uncle Tom didn't use his spot to help everybody that was in his same position, then Uncle Tom was the negative Uncle Tom we talk about today. And unfortunately, I got a lot of negative Uncle Toms around me in political office, carrying badge and gun. I'm not talking about trying to revolt and get blacks to rebel against the slave owners and kill them. No. I'm talking about making sure we can do things where we are allowed to be sustainable for ourselves. And if we want to engage you, barter with you, enact with you, we can, but respectfully and rightly. But for some reason, because melanation has never really had much, whenever something's thrown at us, we'll take it and don't realize that all money we take ain't good money. All money is not good money. Some money you take will throw you into an indentured servant position, whether you like it or not. I'm going to talk more about that on our next broadcast. I really fear that if I keep skipping days, I'm really under consideration that I might do a pop-up tomorrow for the preceding word, just to make sure I can keep this momentum going. Because if I do preceding word every other day, like we do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for this subject matter, I might lose your attention, and you and I will be going around about getting caught up all the time and missing the progression that's needed for this subject matter. So I'm going to ask y'all right now, would y'all like me to continue this on tomorrow, or should I just keep going every other day for the next two services, the next two programs?
Continue tomorrow. Continue tomorrow.
That sounded like my amen corner. Anybody else? Anybody who's not usually here, do you find this informative or educational? If you want to raise your hand, you can. Our moderators will look for you to raise your hand. I think that we need to really talk about this. I'll be bringing on some other wise individuals who are really a part of what we do every day. See, you might not appreciate this from me because you don't see me broadcasting about what I do for quote unquote civil rights affirmative actions. Because what I do is on the ground level. Because that means that when I find there's a problem, I go right to the source. I educate the entity and I help them to ride above. So I feel that the more people I get above that education line and I get you guys formed and I get you guys grouped, you can make the movements. And when you fail and falter, I can keep pushing you back up with the right information to be your fuel to keep going forward. So when you fall back, you don't fall far. I don't want to hype you up and gas you up. But let me also give you this information. We are the only ones who can change. Each person has to make a change. And we can't keep civil war up. We have to keep, watch this, ourselves within our groups educated how to operate and communicate with others who don't care for us. And I'm sorry, it really exists. No matter how many different places I'm invited to, and I'm invited to some very unique, multi-ethnical, multi-financial, multi-influential circles. And as I sit, I observe, I engage, I profit, and I share in. There are differences. But we have to get to a place where we understand we can't just keep going on because we work for someone. We got to start making a difference by educating ourselves and our children, and stop thinking every damnable thing we let our child do from television is cute. Some of that crap is downright insulting. Your daughter in 6-foot eyelashes makes them look at us as ignorant buffoons.
Come on, sir.
We have to help ourselves until we become owners, until we become, I dare say it, but for sake of what we're doing, until we become informed of what it takes to sustain ourselves, which is what a group like, and many people talk negatively about them because they don't understand them. But there was a group that created a program called WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. Because of these very things I just read to you, because resources were taken out that were there by the government, and then the government replaced those resources and those services with police, so they could monitor and put an actual stigma and a label on a particular group of people. And we're not the only ones. I can only speak to me. And unfortunately, we are, even amongst all who have been impacted by said biases, we are the ones disproportionately bothered. Now, everybody's got their own special thing that they themselves have suffered under this great country of democratic representation. I'll never move to another country. I have no need. The other countries will not. I don't need to go through a whole new lesson in that version of racism. And because of the way that the Americans, particularly the African Americans, are propagated and propagandized against in other. I had a gentleman who worked with me at a place called the Hertz, when Hertz was owned by Ford, many years. This had to be back in '99. And he was with me, and I worked for one of the elite parts of Hertz at that time called the Gold Club, when it was really worth being called the Gold Club. Presidential services, customer service was my thing. And this young man from, I think it was Brazil, Colombia, pardon me. He was from Colombia. And he'd come over with his peers that had come before him. And he confessed to me in an argument that we had, because every day he would go up in the break room. Now at Hertz, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees. We would get the break room, very nice facilities. Ford was very, very well about its employees. And so we would go up to the conference room and we'd get our lunches and we go up there and there were several TVs. But this guy particular, he spoke decent enough English to get a paycheck. He put Maury Povich and Sally Jesse Raphael and Ricky Lake and who was that foolish guy who gets Maury Povich? Was Maury? I said Maury already. He put that kind of garbage on TV. So one day we were up there and some of us had come behind him. He again got to the things and we would all sit there just thinking somebody was, people were doing that from the previous shift. So we caught him, put them and click him on, say, we want to watch, the ESPN. And he was like, I got the TV. Okay, that's fine. And then he started making these comments over the next few weeks and months. And he did it again. We all get up there and he beat us up there and he had these TVs on. We're like, man, why do you watch this stuff? He's like, this is you. What you mean this is you? This is you, black people. When I tell you I stopped 8 people from killing him right there in that lobby, I promise you, I lie not. And I said, ho, let's listen to what he got to say. What do you mean this is us? He says, in my country where I come from, this is how we learn English and this is how we understand you. So you mean to tell me that where you get, these are the only channels you get there? And this is what they're telling you about black folk? We fight each other and all this ratchetness. This is how you view us coming over. They don't get the other shows. They don't get Martin. They don't get, the other any. And then again, we don't have a whole bunch of stuff leaving out of here outside of some tomfoolery entertainment that we can appreciate in the States, but other countries think is the standard. I want y'all to think about that. His viewpoint. So we had to sit him down and explain to him, bro, we don't even watch this stuff. The only reason it's on because you put it on. We don't watch this. That stuff is acting. That drives ratings. And that's what you think of us. I said, do any of us very intelligent, technical, highly technical people? He couldn't get more elite. I know he was conflicted, but I'm like, why would you think, do we talk like that? This is how we were taught. This is what we were taught. This is how they told us. This is how they prepared us to come to America. What? These are the stations we get where we are. Now, I'm not telling y'all that because I want to incite anything. I'm telling y'all that because I experienced it. And then got with him and 3 other of his colleagues who came from his country, who are part of his family, who targeted Central Florida to live in. This was in general how they viewed us, which is why they have no respect for us when they get here. That's another part of the conversation we'll talk about later. And the only people that can change that, I'm just going to ask this question in general. Do y'all know who can change that?
We can.
Only we can. And that means we stop letting ourselves get paid to be somebody's buffoon. That means we stop letting ourselves get jerked and stolen and stripped from and then misrepresent what we got. And then they put it behind a comic element and we say, oh, yeah, that's yeah. Because the other countries, the other races, they don't let you do that. And that goes for Christendom too. They can talk jokes about Jesus all day long. But having been both in Islam and being both in Christendom, you talk about Muhammad that way. You make jokes about Muhammad, you will have a literal war on your hands. We just let stuff pass by. We accept any and everything and think that it's okay. We got to stop it. We have to raise our standards. We are some of the most unique and beautiful people on this globe, and we can add value to any country we go to. But because of the way that we're seen around this globe by plantation owners here who never want to see you rise above what they can use you for. And just so we're clear on this slave master mindset, your social security card proves that you are, in fact, a commodity of the United States. And you have a particular reservation placed by that social security number. So when the police come to your door at the house you're renting, they're not there to protect you. You are a property of the United States, and you are also a service end user of a product by whoever owns your home. Until we change that cycle, they only protect and serve property owners. And until we reform policing at its very psychological level, you're always going to have them chasing you down like a wild pig and shooting you. And you wonder why do they do this? They got to know better. It's the nature. And it goes deeper than we're willing to dig. Now, many of you may never view me or listen to me again in the rest of your entire lives. You may think that, yeah, he's good. He need to stick to the Bible. I've purposely stuck to the Bible to avoid weighing in the way that many people felt I should have weighed in on some of these matters. I don't repent because I knew for a fact that when you just always a voice talking, you're just some pundit, some bobblehead, some talking head, people don't listen to you. But I assure you, this matter we are going to need to address. And we need to address it rightly. And though the rapture is coming soon, we are still obligated to occupy until he comes. Your children no longer need to be doing all this crazy stuff that we see going on and being called cute. Oh, that's so cute. You want to teach them the latest nasty, dirty wine dance and have your daughters looking like little harlots, and you wonder why. Have your sons around here acting like thugs, and you wonder why. You think it's cute to have him dangled out in all this. Fashion is one thing. I'm all for fashion. I don't even mind days where you actually have, days where you make up, or days where you have people do costume. But when you start letting that costume and that makeup become that child's reality, then you wonder why you fostered a literal culture that by the time that child's raised up in it, you weren't, but you find it cute and okay for them to do it. You won't be able to control the monster you made. And now you crying over his grave. I'm old enough now to say these things and not concern myself with whether I go to jail for them or not. Because I'm tired of the funerals. And then when I get into the funerals of these injustices, I still have to break it down and like, well, yeah, he was running. Yeah, they did have, and they was fighting. Yeah, they did have a gun. I got to dig that up. Why were they first in trouble? Fine, okay, but they were still inappropriately dealt with. And then when I see their counterparts, when I see a different race having the same situation and even more vicious activity, and they're alive and up for appeal, we don't ever have a chance to come up for appeal because they are rooting out the evil in their mind. and your son, your daughter. And please, to my Caucasian and other ethnicity friends and people of the kingdom, I am not calling and playing a race card. We have one race, and that's humanity. Biases create racism. Yahweh created the human race. So all of us flow together, but there are things that are happening that we need to be able to, as a particular pigmentation, fix within ourselves to present a better image to those who have biases, whether we agree with their biases or not, so that we don't have to be subject to that. And we don't have that. But what we do have is all the pain that comes from being subservient to any other group and being told by other groups how we should be. You people. Excuse me? Oh, you look so nice today. Little man, little lady, I look nice every day. What, you going to church today? Excuse me?
Come on, come on.
That's a mindset. That is a propagandized response to stereotype. Thank you for the compliment. But you have no understanding who I am. Until we start dealing with these little differences and these little things, back in the days before Martin Luther King, and the reason that these men such as him, though he's got, whatever the issues are, we still must understand that we held a very scary position of educated men. We have drastically, negatively changed that narrative. And wonder why in the arenas we say we want to enter into, they won't accept us. Should they be allowed to do that? No. Matter of fact, should we even have to want to be in those circles? The problem is they've infiltrated and caused such types of debauchery and undivisiveness amongst us, we can't even bring ourselves together to help ourselves so we can present better for our future. Now stop hiding behind Jesus. I said that.
Come on. Come on.
My name is Apostle Jones. We can't hide behind Jesus or this cross with that. What Messiah left us was how to have a commonwealth. Not to be a slave to foolishness.
Come on.
So from this state of this Black American citizen with a kingdom perspective, we got a long way to go and a short time to do it in.
Yes.
But it can be done. We're going to have to learn how to work together and stop letting money that just weirdly shows up in our communities keep us divided, because that was its intention, to keep us divided.
Come on.
But whoever got the money felt like, nah, that ain't it. Nah, they good people. Now you know the story behind places that can support and fund division. There are things we'll talk about later on called eugenics, which unfortunately most African Americans and many Caucasian Americans didn't even know about. And God forbid, our dear brothers and sisters and Caucasoid, Mongoloid, as well as Negroid from other countries on this planet are unaware of. Y'all just see us over here acting out and acting up. Oh, they're ungrateful. Oh, we don't have what you think we have to work with.
Come on.
I'm going to break it all down for you. Because what you can do, my foreigner, friend, brother in faith, sister in faith, who I love, what you would have if you came here, we who are from here have been intentionally chiseled out of ever procuring what you get just by being a foreigner. And you would never believe it. Ah, it's impossible. No, this isn't the days of slavery. It just looks different. The cotton fields are no different than the prison cells today. But until we have a conversation that doesn't just deal with the anger of injustice and deals with the root of a system that causes the injustice.
Yes.
And not to say that America is a place that you should not live. The African-American citizen in the United States, you do not have another place to go.
Come on.
You don't. So it's time you begin to build here so the reputation of you can be changed across the globe, and they might consider rethinking how they view you, because America itself has propagandized our existence to the point that no other country wants you riffraff, loud,
Come on.
blaring. And America wants to keep you so that it can keep its money, because you don't know how to handle it, myself included. I ain't talking about y'all, I'm talking about us.
Come on.
And much of that non-usage is because we didn't go to school to learn financial instrumentation. We did not go to school to learn what we call tax law, tax code, because you and I were given scenarios, and yet people will say, oh, you're hiding behind that. No, we're not hiding behind that. We were hidden behind it.
Come on.
My heart hurts, and I really am hurting. And I hope it doesn't sound like some emotional pour out, because this is factual.
Yes, that's right.
Four o'clock. Proceeding word went too long. I think I'll be back tomorrow instead of Friday. And I'll be back Friday.
Amen.
I promise you tomorrow.
Yes.
We want this way we don't have to get caught up again. Today I had to spend a good deal getting us caught up. And yes, this hurts because we thought we knew. We thought we knew. We thought we were above that. We just assumed that because we saw people who would be now Nobel Peace Prizes recipients making headway and some great contributions from our communities. And it's not just us. It was the Jewish people had these same issues, the Latino people, some of them had these same issues. And I can tell you and break down for you what you need to know. There's a reason there were people called conquistadors.
Yes.
Just think about the name and then get back to me. There are reasons that there are all of these different places. Our Chinese people who came over here. Now, listen, our Japanese who came over here and because of wars, Vietnamese people who've come over here because of wars and have been ill-treated and put in concentration camps and all these things. There's all types of versions, all types of situations, but I promise you, no other ethnicity, as it were, in American history has suffered greater by the American history
Teach true.
than the African American here. Now, my Jewish brethren and sisters, the Holocaust was real. Anybody trying to diffuse that, something wrong with you. The historicity that we have of the Torah and the Tanakh and the Brit Hadassa of Israel and their bondage, though there's a lot to discuss about that, they did and went through a lot. There is a reason they went through some of those things. And I don't speak that to be negative. I speak that to be just real. And then there's a reason we here in America are going through some of the stuff that we go through, because we've not taken the roads once they were made available to us. And we started to kill the voices of them who propagated that door is open, go through it. No one told me to do what I now know to do when I was younger, and the same doors were open then, because the people who should have been telling me that were doing what they wanted to do to get what mattered to them to the next place. And we never cared, though we cried community for us, because once we got out of the hood, once we got out of the neighborhood, we never looked back to help each other out. I am not making an excuse. I'm just giving you the empirical data.
Come on, true. Come on.
And when you get a voice every now and then crying in the wilderness, and then they get caught up with hype, and then they go on their own separate vein to try to make everybody else look stupid and look dumb. We need to stop all that. And whatever information you have, let's bring it to the table so everybody can have it.
Come on. Come on.
Because one thing we know how to do well is share. We've been sharing the same cookies and the same sugar and the same flour and the same salt. Baby, I need some salt. Go see if Auntie got some across the street. Hey, we need some sugar. Can you go see if they got some over down the way? And we've been sharing and swapping those cups of whatever it is, milk, eggs, back and forth. We know how to share. What would happen if we had wealth? What would we look like? And I think that there are people that know if that ever took place, they would never be in charge like they are now. Again.
Come on.
That's true.
That's right.
But they got us fighting each other. You depending on Jesus to bring you out. He already did.
Come on. Come on.
He did his job. You got to do yours.
Yes.
All right. All right. I'm going to give 12 seconds to anybody who might want to have a comment or a statement. And I hope that if we have offended you, please understand, you know, my heart was not to offend you, but I think in many instances, truth can do that. Truth can hurt, especially when we hadn't particularly thought about truth hurting. So Clubhouse, if you're here before we go out, Facebook, if you're here before we go out, if anyone would like to make a comment or a statement of what you may or may not have learned and whether or not you think I should come back tomorrow, let me know. I give 4 people what much time we got. Yeah, all right. I give 5 people 30 seconds if you'd like to make a comment or share. And remember, I'm not seeking your glory. I'm not seeking your praise. I don't care how you think about what I'm saying, but I do care that you're thinking about what's being said. And I don't need to be complimented, or I don't need to be demonized either. I'm simply wanting to put us in a place where our eyes can focus on something truly effective to bring the necessary change in our communities. So if you'd like to share something, if you agree, you disagree, just don't be rude. I can hear anything you say, and I can talk with you about anything you want to discuss. But I'll give 30 seconds. I'll give 30 seconds. I didn't hear the name. Whoever that name was, moderators catch the name. And we'll give 30 seconds to 5 people. And you all 30 seconds, say your names. Our moderators will catch your names. If we go over 5, if it's necessary, I'll probably leniency. We got about 15 minutes, and I think we can get a lot of covered in that time period. If you're on Facebook, you got a comment, I'll listen to your Facebook on comments on Facebook. And if you got a statement you want to make here on Clubhouse, you also have a 30-second window to do that. Right now, I think we got a queue. Pastor Leslie is what I heard, and there was someone else. I don't know who that was. Just say your name if you would like to share for 30 seconds, and we'll go from there.
Peacock. Yes.
All right, Leslie,
Shalom.
Pastor Leslie, go first. Peacock, I heard you in channel. If you, again, for those of you, if someone's speaking, just say your name and we will hear you. Go ahead, Pastor Leslie.
I just want to say that because this was a lot of information with surface work, that yes, we still need to be educated and understand with clarity what needs to happen and where we need to go from here. So I'm in agreement with us still learning, because this is a part of learning who we are as a people. So yes.
All right. And for those of you, I heard a comment, which I did delete. I won't say the name, but if you are already having a bad day and now the information I've shared with you has made your day worse, my objective was not to make your bad day. My objective is to make a better way for us to live. And most of our bad day that we're having is based on our condition in society. And until we change our perspective and our position in society by coming together in unity, we're always going to have bad days, because most of our bad days isn't really health driven. Most of our bad health is driven by our posture and our position in a society that could care less about you other than your financial and your back labor. That's a hard lesson to learn. So I did delete the comment because I don't think that it speaks properly to the platform. And if you're having a bad day, again, my objective was not to worsen your day. And if you took it that way, we repent to you. But I got to keep teaching truth until he returns. All right. Anyone else with a comment?
Yeah, Peacock and then Brother Jason.
I have Peacock and then Brother Jason. Brother Jason. Wow, surprise. Good to hear.
Hey, bro.
Hey, man, miss you. Good to hear you here. We're going to come right to you, brother. Peacock, go ahead.
I concur with, good day, Shalom, with Pastor Leslie. This was so much information, and I do appreciate all that I've heard. It's so much. I'll have to go back and listen to the replay, but I concur with her as well. Continue on tomorrow and the next day so we can continue to work together with this. As you educate us on some things, we need to go forth with it. So thank you, Apostle. Appreciate it.
And before we go to our next person, we have 3 more slots. For anybody want to share something, you can. Moderators will hear your name. Just say your name, and they will get you. But I want to make sure that when we move forward, the information I want to bring you guys tomorrow is going to shock some of you, but it will be something you can go and read yourself in multiple publications and even in the Library of Congress. So when we share this information, no, we're not just, being emotional. We're giving you the empirical data. But in order for us to move forward, the first thing we have to do is we got to move forward with our families, which means we got to find a way to get a hold and a grasp on our offspring. And food for thought before our next person to speak is, we have to change the narrative as both grandparents and definitely as parents on the impacts we allow to hit our children at age 2 seconds old. Because a government that thinks that your child born in its country is not your child, but a ward of the state that it's in, believes that they own that life. And then they tag it with a social security number, which makes it a financial instrument. And then they feel that they can control certain communities by imploring certain services. And because of legislation we have allowed to slip in, come in and tell you, you are not capable of raising a child, whether you are or are not, and then take your child from your care or force you into a narrative of sharing with your children that is only to its benefit. And I mean it by the government. And no disrespect, I am happy and proud to live in America, but America is not perfect. I cannot live in another country. I can visit, and even when I visit, just based on the customer service I receive here and abroad, we are not valued unless we're spending money. I had a situation where I was spending money with a group of people, and the moment I told them, that's it, I'm not spending anymore, I was, oh, hey, man, buddy, we're going to share and all of this. And then as soon as I was like, yeah, okay, I've spent enough. You're out of money. What? I wanted the service, and I don't want what else you're selling. And then you can hear them making comments. They didn't know that I knew a few words in their language. And it was like, all they really want and care about is my money. And if it's a service industry, fine, I can deal with that. But that's also how they see you. We have to change that.
Come on.
Only we can. And it starts with our children. I think that's a great segue to another great man that I have a great deal of respect for, Jason Hodge, because he's doing what I did and do. And though there's no guarantees, even though you do the process, that society won't turn them out after you've turned them out from your home. But the Bible assures me that if I train up my child in the way that they should go, when they get older, they won't depart from it. We have the example of the prodigal son who will figure it out later on if it wasn't everything that was needed. Brother Hodges, man, what you got? Good to hear from you again, sir.
Bro. Yeah, no, this was rich. I'm working in the background, but I had you tuned in on Facebook, and I was catching bits and pieces. I was like, wow, you're really diving into some necessary information. And the key that you talked about is to be able to take in the data and to not take it in through our emotions, right, but to understand just what the foundation of all of this is really all about. I think if most of us understood even why the school system is set up the way that it is, we would have a second thought on where we insert our children.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And then that mindset piece, moving from consumer to producer, is so critical, because the reason why they see us as commodity chasers in other countries, other spaces, and here, is because we have been moving in an arena where we are being the buyers,
right? And
we're not bolstering our economic base. So I'm doing some things right now inside of Houston. We're starting this whole initiative because the recidivism rate is pretty high,
right?
And I said, you know what? We can't speak to emotions, and we can't speak to the children about what they shouldn't do. I said, because that's immediately how you're going to
get them to do it.
That particular activating system for them to focus in on that.
Right.
I said, we need to do something that is going to build that economic base and instill the mindset so that they understand how to leverage that so that they can build their homes, build their communities properly. So I loved everything that you had to say here. And I think I'm looking forward to how you just unfold the rest of the series with the history. When I let my boys see the Rockefeller, when John D. Rockefeller, General Education Board, New York, I let them read it to me so that they couldn't say, well, my dad doesn't want me in public school. They can understand why they're not there. And when they read it, they're like, Dad, this is like slavery. I said,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
and to your point, you know, my children, I let them go through the school system because at the time when I finally got it, though I was extremely well engaged as their educator.
Right.
We have taken a system called the system of education and think that it is the educator of our children, and it's not. The system of education is only designed to help. It was in its original, before Rockefeller in America changed it, even Torah based. It's a place where you take your children, Bet Midrash, Bet Tlafar, you take them to be able to practice memorizing the governance that is our nation and culture. It is the parent who was working, but was able to pay for a system to help them educate their children, which would take on the task of helping the children memorize the texts that would be needed when the tests of life came about. And the parent, knowing you have the same data, can now extract that, educate that out of you to problem solve in this test.
Yes.
Now that's deep. Most people didn't catch that. Y'all went to sleep. But I'm telling y'all, at the end of the day, we have used the education system as if it's what educates our children, and it's you. So all of my children, the reason I let them into public school was because they needed the socializing skills. I really felt that that was important. But every day, Mom and I would sit with them in their homework, one of us or both of us, and make sure they understood what this was, where it came from, what parts are inaccurate, what parts hide the involvement of your own culture and race in the story that they've told. And then we would go and get the support to our point and give it back to them. So unless you're willing to do that type of work, don't just leave your child subject to the education system in America, because it pushes a narrative that literally suppresses you, and that's based on the legislation that you and I are subject to.
Exactly.
And that is racism. So what they did was they put children in a room to tell your child eugenics. Again, you put Rockefeller with eugenics, and then you get what Gates is doing, and y'all don't want to hear me talk about that. But when I do, you're gonna be like, oh snap, right? And all that you're doing with Twitter, and all that you're doing with Facebook, and all that you're doing with all these great little things that you guys are doing, and y'all fall in love with TikTok.
Yeah.
Wrong thing to do.
Doesn't understand the foundation of it.
Wrong thing to do. They are watching everything you do. They are tracking back every way you get. And that's how you are not just a commodity pursuant. You do not even, they're showing you how ignorant you are. And they use that in their arenas to educate who they want in the elite circles to know how to keep its people subjected to it. And we willingly give it to them. Every time you show, every day, if you're not showing something, reason I love you, Jason Hodges, is because every one of your broadcasts are educating.
Yeah.
You're teaching self-sustainability in your own kitchen. You can still grow your own kumquats.
Yep.
You know, you can cook this. You can cook certain things that make you healthy.
Yeah.
And it's education. Whereas most of us using TikTok, IG, Facebook, all these media platforms are displaying how many meals we just ate at this high class Michelin 5-star restaurant, and that I got money to do it. I'm chasing the bag. I got the bag. You can get the bag too. I am not for luxuriation. I am bougie. I have no problem paying for quality service, but please understand me. I want to make sure that when I pay for it, it's something I want.
Right.
And it's not something I aspire to be able to do.
Hello.
If I feel like I can and I should, I want to have the freedom to do it.
Yes.
But to have that freedom, the standard necessities of life, I need to find out a better way to make sure I still have and not have to spend a high premium for those simplicities.
Mm-hmm. That's good, bro.
Thank you for sharing, Doc. Hope that you and the boys will be
doing well.
Good, man.
Doing well.
Good, man.
Yeah.
All right,
man. Love you, bro.
Love you, bro. Thanks again. All right. We had another person on platform want to share.
Valerius.
Hi, Valerius. Shalom to you.
Shalom to everyone. This hits home. I mean, it really hits home. My son was in the car with his friend, and they were parking. So he took off the seatbelt, but the police told him he didn't have a seatbelt on, so he went to jail.
For a seatbelt.
So, for a seatbelt.
I'm gonna say it again.
They
For
were parked. They
for
were,
for a seatbelt.
For a seatbelt.
Right. So
with my other grandchildren, which are boys,
okay,
I constantly have meetings with them. I'm constantly trying to find strong men for them. And this article that was up here, I would definitely send it to them, because now I raised my one grandson. He's like 27 now. And he says, Nanny, I don't even want to go out. He says, I got to be back in before a certain time. I don't want to go out.
Right. Yeah.
Because of, the police
brutality.
brutality.
All that we have. And it's the ignorance of ourselves to have allowed for this to continue this long, but it was also strategic to make sure we remained ignorant regarding how we should approach things. And we sort of kind of hope that the politicians that we helped to vote get into office could make the different kind of changes. Some of them really had good intentions, but could not make moves because of a complete construct that would basically thwart at multiple levels, what could be done. So we got people who've passed away that I'm so afraid of Congress right now. We let some of the best people die before they could ever fill their role, because no one would get behind them with other hammers and sledgehammers and break these false plates that kept us imprisoned. And I guess I'm at a stage now where you get a certain age and you got to say something. More importantly, you got to do something. And as I watch a great deal of, people that are a part of my culture and understand this and have tried to use the legal system to get things done and died doing it, it's not just here in America. This is global. But in America, we've got to make the change for us if we're going to have a change here and be accepted anywhere else on this planet. And I run risk of losing, people who like to be associated with me of different ethnicities. But I'm at a point now where I hope you're wise enough to know my heart, that I'm looking for unity of all people. I want one thing, and that's what Yahweh created, the human race. There was no white, there was no black, there was no green, there was no red.
Sherry.
There was human. And that's what I want to see. So if I do lose any of my ethnic different friends. It is what it is. Pastor Spencer makes a statement that we're going to be delving into much deeper, and that is, in reality, that when truth speaks, wisdom listens. So if you're here with us today and you're listening, you're a wise person. If you tune in and don't listen, looking for ways to prove it wrong or shoot it down, then that speaks to what that is. But these are the things we got to remember. All right, real quick, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, guys. Who was the next one in queue?
You had Lindo and then Sherry.
Lindo, 30 seconds. Sherry, we got 30 seconds as well. Lindo, go.
Shalom and thank you. Apostle, this is raw. Also real and so raw. But one of the things that came to mind, I understand, but you hit it earlier with Jason, the education or lack thereof, because what is going on now and what are they being taught and how they're being taught it? Bible is no longer in school. And then when I look at this portion of it, just the beginning, how do you circumvent this rhetoric with where you begin, even as much as you do at home, and look at that family or that young lady that's raising a child alone, or that man that's raising a child alone that has to work 1, 2, and 3 jobs. And then here we go, we have this child that we shut them in school because it's a way of getting to work. I mean, there's so many different areas of this that, my God, a sledgehammer is not even big enough to do this to start the job. But at the same time, I also look at when our children and they come in, the armed forces come into the schools and they all come at you. I was one of them in the Air Force. You took a test, and because you scored high, everybody wanted you. But then when you go in the background and you're a single parent and they look at you and say, oh, back then, they look at you and they say to you, oh, you have to give up your child for adoption. You can't come in. We want you, and we have to be responsible only for you. And when I look at that and look back at where we are,
that's control.
Our enforcement, when they put our children up there in the forefront, and when they come home, nobody looks back at them. So, my God, it just goes so wide, so deep.
There's so much that we could talk about in this, and that's why we have to do this in tranches. So today I want to give you the motive for why, and give you the necessary history for why, and now how do we put this into a kingdom perspective. There'll be a little bit more empirical data that we render on the next broadcast, and then we'll talk about how the kingdom perspective has to actually operate in light of these demoralizing and disrespectful issues, and how we got to be responsible for our own idiocy and not just go around blaming Whitey did this and Whitey did that. Because this kind of darkness can't just come from Whitey. Because Whitey can't do this by himself. Blackie had to do some of this too.
Take responsibility, yes.
Blackie sold out some things too.
Come on.
And again, the Bible being in the schools is not my issue. But what the school represents today for the sake of the country and how the country views its citizenship. This is what we have to start understanding, because you can get propagandized, marketed, sold a narrative, sold a bill of lading, and think that that is it, and stick yourself to that and forget that there is something behind that reasoning. And that's what we've done. Same thing with our religion, as it were. All right. Thank you for adding very good value, Lindo. And we'll talk about the military shortly, as we did briefly here in this well-written article, The Invention of the Police by Jill D. All right. I heard another voice. Who was that, moderators?
Sherry.
All right, Sherry, you got 30 seconds. Go. Sherry.
Give her a moment, Apostle.
Okay.
Sherry, there she is.
Okay, in my state, we're allowed to openly carry now, and there are a lot of Caucasians just walking around with their guns in their holsters. And my daughter, she has a gun, but she keeps it in her purse. I said, you know what? Don't I don't want you carrying that thing, because just because they say you could carry it openly, that doesn't mean you can carry it openly. They may shoot too. I'm telling both of my girls this because I don't want them to get shot, even though they think that they can openly carry.
I hear you on that, Sherry, and I hear your mother's heart. And I'm going to be talking about that also from humanity's perspective. None of us want any one of our loved ones hurt or harmed. But myself, I'm very content with my arsenal of weaponry. You come from my family, you got to deal with me. And yes, I got the Holy Ghost. And yes, I got angels I can dispatch at any time. But in case you ain't spiritual, we can talk about some tangibilities.
Come on.
Yeah.
Now,
That's it.
Now, I'm a licensed carry, and I educate my children to be licensed carry. Not out of fear of something happening, but because it's a law. And that's the reason. Matter of fact, people want to talk about gun as an issue. And Sherry, I hear you 100%. I'm with you. Because it doesn't mean that the law will protect you. That's why even an open carry, there's only a certain way you can do that, or
License.
For concealed carry as well. I may be concealed carry, but it has to be concealed. It should not be seen. And the only time you feel the need to do that is when you are completely in danger of your very life. Many people don't know this one fact about the law. If a citizen of the United States feels, and this is law, and I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but this is the law. If a citizen of the United States feels as if they are being harassed by police and unlawfully detained, the books still have the law that says they can protect themselves from that agent. But you're not being told that. Which is why, in total disclosure, 5 people come to the scene. Because if so ever you should happen to know that, you can be quickly overpowered. Now that sounds so controversial, and I know I'm going to get a lot of mail on that. Y'all are quiet. Y'all quiet. Y'all got real quiet on me. Y'all don't hear nobody.
Powerful, so powerful.
Come on, Bishop. Come on.
And so where we are today is a place where we got to start working with each other to get things done and done rightly. And none of us are, the funny thing about the African American, they want so much for unity. We've got to be the only group that just wants to. I mean, Rodney King, a part of his epitaph is he epitomizes, I really believe, the true African American way of wanting to do things. Can't we all just get along? We can all eat. All of us, if we work together, can simply eat, and we can live in a society where you can have the same thing I got, and I can have the same thing you got, and it can still be all luxurious. It does not have to be a competition as to who has the better version, the greater version, the most versions. And the African American in America just wants to get along, and to be forced to go along with something in order to be perceived as getting along is control at its core. And control breeds slavery, no matter how you make it.
Come on.
Sherry, I'm praying with you and your daughter. I still say that they need to, because you still have different types of assaults that can be happening to a person just because they are beautiful women. They need some form of protection. That's why you got mace, you got blades, you got guns, you got whatever. I do believe every human has the right to be protected and have protection they can depend on. I don't know where we get it, but we think that the disciples didn't carry weapons. Every one of the disciples, I believe, including Messiah, it was customary. They carried daggers.
Come on.
That part. I mean, the priests, they carried daggers.
Yep.
And so we're in America. America would not be America if it were not for the Second Amendment. Because America's big issue was that every man had to be carrying a weapon in the times of what they called the Minutemen, when they were finally trying to break free of the Britain effort at colonizing them, colonializing them, and making them an extension of Britain. And when y'all read the story, do I have any on platform? Do I have any non-US citizens on platform right now? Hey, okay, good, you're still here. Listen, for those of you who are not, oh, and you're from the UK too, good. When you guys don't get the history about you, any foreigner does not get the history as a foreigner about the storytell of things like the Boston Tea Party or Paul Revere or the Benedict Arnold. You got food after him, but you don't know how we portray him. And no, you don't. So you don't hear as a Briton, as a UK, as a Londoner, you don't hear that in America, Paul Revere getting on that horse said, the redcoats are coming. The redcoats are coming. That was Britain. And you don't shoot every human, every citizen, every person in this countryside is to have a weapon and to have bullets. So when they come, all of us who have right to carry gun, every man has a right to carry a gun to protect his livestock from beasts of prey, as well as marauders, and this type of potential enslavement of another country. Guns is not our issue, though guns are a part of the issue, and the legislation have said, and you would not have people getting illegal guns if guns were legal. Think about that. And why are guns illegal to certain people and not illegal to other people? How come this person can have a gun and that person can't have a gun? It's what you write in your laws. And when your laws are written to sort of kind of block out and buffer out certain groups, then you are trying to control certain groups. Because if I can't protect myself, but you can assault me in any kind of way you want to, that is a problem. So before we get whitewashed by this issue of gun law reform, gun laws do need to be reformed. We have progressed as a people, especially in the United States of America. But America, listen, without the gun is not America. It's Britain. Let that sink in. So you don't hear the story that we don't want to shoot until we see the reds of their eyes. the whites of their eyes. Any Americans on platform? Is that what they taught you in history?
Yes, sir. American history.
And that's just from the American side of things. I think Proceeding Word is done for today. I'll come back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll talk more about that then. It's been a joy talking with you guys. I hope that this just stems a conversation of consciousness for you and not this woke society, but understand that we got a lot more work to do, and it's not going to take protesting to get it done. It's going to take proactive legislation, proactive education moving forward. If Messiah tarries for another 25, 30 years, we may have a chance to see effective change. If we begin educating our children from 2 seconds old about how to be a legislator, about how to be a lawyer, understanding just not just going out to take a job from somebody, but being able to create sufficiencies for yourself through the resources and materials that may evolve during your era of time, and you being in the production of commodities and not just a consumer of sin. My name is Apostle B.W. Jones, and I am aware of all the different dynamics that can fall to my door in light of this conversation and the generalizing that I've done. Not everything I said was touched at its deepest place. We are in a series. If you allow me time to finish the series, I will give you enough that you will want to go research it yourself and then come back and look for a unified approach to progressing an appropriate way of living. But before you crucify me, pastors and leaders, politicians who are my friends, law enforcement officers who are my friends, and multiplicities of ethnicities who are my friends, know I'm just for unity. I think we all can exist, and I want to exist with all of you. I need the diversities of you. You need the diversity of me. This is not about promoting racism, but right now I have to draw a line in the sand that I can't keep taking what you're shoving down my throat.
Come on.
That part.
Hallelujah.
And then go back out and tell the world, oh, it'll change. Father, we thank you for this opportunity. I pray that I've done well by you. I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart have been acceptable in your sight. I pray that no one misinterprets or misconstrues the things that we are trying to communicate to a people that are about unity and peace. Following it, no man can see you. But how we can obtain peace, even Messiah came not to bring peace, but to bring a sword, to bring delineation and to show where there is wrong so we can fix it and make it right. No man ruling over another, trying to control another. I can't speak like you can to their minds. But I thank you for letting me be just a vapor of wind to maybe make an odor of rightness in front of a people. Man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of you, Yahweh. You are our Elohim. We ask and pray this in the mighty name of Yeshua HaMashiach, that we learn your words to live. Amen. All right, everybody, it's been a joy talking with you. Remember, we'll be back here tonight for our proceeding word. As a matter of fact, we will be back here tomorrow or tonight for our Daraj Kingdom Ministries Bible study. And guess what? Another controversial subject. We will be talking about the Torah. We will be talking about Yahweh's kingdom, edict, and governance. Within it, the controversial subject of this last month, unnecessarily, We will talk directly about the tithe. You're going to learn the truth from the Torah about the tithe. How is it? What is it? Why is it? And when did it expire? I hope you'll tune in, and I hope you will inquire. 7 p.m. tonight, DKM, Darash Kingdom Ministries. Darash in Hebrew means sought out. So we don't send you flyers to be a part of our ministry. We don't come knocking on your doors and tell you we're in the neighborhood. If you're here, you were seeking truth. And when you heard some truth, your wise self sat down to listen. That's what DKM is about. Sought out Kingdom Ministries. We didn't seek you out. You heard truth because you were searching for truth, and it's caught your attention. So be here tonight as we talk more truth, not religion, about the tithe. Let's dispel the controversy and let's reason together in the writ that gave us the tithe. What does Yahweh say about it? And we take you from there. May Yahweh bless you and keep you is my prayer. We'll see you tonight, 7 p.m. Shalom Aleichem. This room will end in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you for tuning in today. I hope that this message has been a blessing to your very life and your soul, and more importantly, your walk with the King. Well, we have come to the end. I hope that you would consider becoming either a partner with us in ministry, or if you're not already a kingdom citizen, consider becoming one. By doing that, you can sow into this ministry so that we are able to continue to teach this type of ministry at a grand scale. Join us on all of our social media platforms and visit our webpage to make your contributions sure. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Shalom Aleichem.